In the shadowed halls of Ashburn Manor, a cryptic letter lures Hercule Poirot into a deadly game. A secret tied to Agatha Christie herself, a lost manuscript that could ruin reputations, sparks a trail of murder. As guests turn on each other, a locked study, a hidden vault, and a burning attic conceal clues to a sinister truth. Who is killing to keep the secret buried? And what is the stunning revelation that even Poirot might not survive? The clock is ticking, and the truth is a dangerous prize. Chapter 1. The Whispered Invitation. The morning mist clung to the cobblestones of London's quieter streets, wrapping Hercule Poirot's modest apartment in a shroud of silver. Inside, the fastidious Belgian detective sat at his mahogany desk, his mustache impeccably trimmed, his green eyes sharp as they scanned a letter that had arrived with the dawn post. The envelope, cream-colored and heavy with the scent of lavender, bore no return address, only a wax seal embossed with a curious symbol, a quill crossed with a rose. Poirot's slender fingers, gloved in precision, broke the seal with care, revealing a single sheet of paper inscribed in elegant, looping script. Dear Monsieur Poirot, your reputation as a man of unparalleled intellect precedes you. I invite you to Ashburn Manor, in the heart of Devon, for a weekend that promises revelations of a most extraordinary nature. A secret, long buried, tied to the legacy of Agatha Christie herself, awaits. Come alone and speak of this to no one. Your discretion is paramount. A car will collect you at precisely 10 a.m. tomorrow, yours in anticipation. An admirer of truth. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, his mind already turning like the gears of a Swiss watch. An admirer of truth, he murmured, setting the letter down. Yet they hide behind anonymity. Most curious, he rose, his polished shoes clicking softly on the hardwood floor, and crossed to the window. The mist swirled outside, as if conspiring to keep the letter's secrets. A challenge, then one that piqued his little gray cells. He would go to Ashburn Manor, not out of vanity, but because a puzzle so boldly presented demanded to be solved. The next morning, at precisely 10 a.m., a sleek black Rolls-Royce purred to a stop outside Poirot's apartment. The driver, a gaunt man with eyes like shadowed pools, said nothing beyond a curt nod. Poirot, dressed in a tailored gray suit with a silver teapin, settled into the leather seat, his ebony cane resting across his knees. The journey to Devon was silent, the countryside unfolding in a tapestry of emerald hills and ancient hedgerows. As the car wound through narrow lanes, Poirot's mind danced with possibilities. A secret tied to Agatha Christie, the authoress, whose novels he admired for their cunning, had left a legacy of mysteries. Could this be a lost manuscript, a scandal, or something altogether more sinister? Ashburn Manor loomed into view as the car crested a hill, its Gothic spires piercing the autumn sky. The estate sprawled across acres of manicured lawn, its stone facade weathered yet majestic, with ivy curling like veins over its walls. The driver opened the door, and Poirot stepped out, his sharp gaze sweeping the scene. A butler, stiff as a marionette, greeted him at the entrance. Monsieur Poirot, he said, his voice clipped, welcome. The other guests have arrived. Please, follow me. The grand hall of Ashburn Manor was a study in opulence. Crystal chandeliers glittered above a marble floor, and portraits of stern-faced ancestors glowered from the walls. Poirot's attention, however, was drawn to the guests already gathered near a roaring fireplace. There were 7 in total, each distinct, each radiating an air of unease that intrigued him. First, there was Madame Claire Duval, a retired actress whose silver hair and regal posture suggested a life spent commanding stages. Her eyes, however, flickered with a nervousness that belied her poise. Beside her stood Mr. Lionel Tate, a librarian with a stooped frame and inked fingers, clutching a leather notebook as if it were a lifeline. Miss Evelyn Warwick, a journalist with a sharp jaw and sharper tongue, leaned against a table, her notepad open and her pen poised like a weapon. Dr. Rupert Hargrove, a historian with a penchant for tweed and a distracted air, peered at a bookshelf, as if it held the answers to the universe. Mrs. Beatrice Langston, a widow draped in black lace, sat rigidly, her gloved hands folded tightly. Mr. Julian Marsh, a young artist with a disheveled mop of curls, sketched idly in a corner, his eyes darting suspiciously. Finally, Miss Penelope Gray, a quiet botanist, hovered near a window, her fingers tracing the petals of a potted orchid. The butler, introducing himself as Mr. Harrow, announced that their host, Sir Edmund Ashburn, would join them shortly. In the meantime, he said, "Please make yourselves comfortable. Refreshments are available in the drawing room." His tone was formal, but Poirot caught a fleeting glance toward the staircase, as if expecting something or someone. Poirot mingled, his charm disarming as he probed gently. "Madame Duval," he said, offering a slight bow, "your presence suggests this weekend holds more than mere pleasantries. Have you met our host before?" Claire Duval's smile was practiced, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "Sir Edmund, only by reputation. He's a collector of rare books, I hear, quite passionate about his treasures." Her voice lingered on the word treasures, and Poirot noted it, filing it away like a card in his mental index. "To Mr. Tate," he remarked, "a librarian among such company. Surely you are here for more than the scenery, Nan." Tate's fingers tightened on his notebook. I was invited to catalogue Sir Edmund's library," he stammered. "He owns manuscripts of considerable value." His hesitation spoke volumes, and Poirot's mustache twitched. Miss Warwick was less guarded. "I'm here for a story," she said bluntly, her pen tapping her notepad. "Sir Edmund claims he's uncovered something about Agatha Christie that'll shake the literary world. If it's true, I'll have the scoop of the century." Her ambition was palpable, but Poirot sensed a hunger that went beyond professional curiosity. As the afternoon waned, the guests grew restless. Sir Edmund's absence stretched into hours, and the atmosphere thickened with unspoken questions. Poirot, ever observant, noticed details. Madame Duval's repeated glances at a locked door off the hall. Mr. Tate's nervous habit of adjusting his spectacles. Miss Warwick's subtle attempts to eavesdrop. The manor itself seemed to watch them, its creaking floors and shadowed corners whispering secrets. At dusk, Poirot proposed exploring the manor while awaiting their host. The guests agreed, though reluctance hung heavy in the air. They moved as a group, their footsteps echoing through corridors lined with tapestries and gilt-framed mirrors. Poirot's attention was drawn to a heavy oak door at the end of a hallway, its surface carved with roses and quills, the same symbol as the letters seal. A brass lock gleamed, unyielding. "This must be Sir Edmund's study," Poirot said, his voice calm but commanding. "And yet, it is locked. Most intriguing." He turned to Mr. Harrow, who had followed silently. "Have you the key, monsieur?" The butler hesitated, then produced a ring of keys. "Sir Edmund is particular about his study," he said, unlocking the door with a faint click. The room beyond was a bibliophile's dream. Shelves groaned under the weight of leather-bound volumes. A mahogany desk held an array of pens and inkwells, and a single red rose rested in a crystal vase, its petals vibrant against a dim light. Poirot's eyes scanned the room, cataloging every detail. A rug was slightly askew, revealing a faint outline in the floorboards, perhaps a trapdoor. A portrait of a young woman, her features strikingly familiar, hung above the desk. The guests murmured, their curiosity piqued, but Poirot's focus sharpened on a small, leather-bound journal on the desk, its pages marked with a ribbon. Before he could examine it, a piercing scream shattered the silence. The group rushed to the window, where Miss Gray stood, her face pale. "In the garden," she gasped, pointing. Through the glass, illuminated by the fading light, lay a figure, sprawled on the grass, motionless. A collective gasp rose as keen eyes identified the man's distinctive silver hair and tailored coat. "It is Sir Edmund," Poirot said, his voice steady despite the shock rippling through the room. "And he is, I fear, quite dead." The guests erupted in chaos. Duval clutched her pearls. Mr. Tate dropped his notebook, and Miss Warwick scribbled furiously. Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. "Mies Amos," We are now in the midst of a mystery most profound. Sir Edmund's death is no accident, and the secret he promised to reveal is, I suspect, the key. Let us proceed with order and method. He led the group to the garden, where Sir Edmund lay face down, a fountain pen clutched in his stiffening hand. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers examining the scene with surgical precision. The pen was no ordinary instrument. Its barrel was engraved with the same Quillandro symbol. A faint smudge of ink on Sir Edmund's fingers suggested he had been writing moments before his death. Nearby, a crumpled note lay half hidden in the grass. Poirot retrieved it, unfolding it to reveal a single line in the same looping script as the invitation. The truth lies within. The guests hovered, their faces a gallery of fear, suspicion, and curiosity. Poirot stood, his expression unreadable. This note, he said, holding it aloft, is the first thread in a tapestry of deception. Someone in this manor knows why Sir Edmund died and what secret he meant to unveil. Hercule Poirot will discover it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting Ashburn Manor in shadow, the guests retreated inside, their whispers trailing like ghosts. Poirot lingered, his gaze fixed on the rose in the study's vase, its petals trembling in the evening breeze. A secret tied to Agatha Christie, a locked study, a dead host, and a house full of strangers with motives yet to be uncovered. The game, as Poirot often said, was afoot. The chapter's conclusion left the manor steeped in tension, each guest a potential suspect, each clue a step closer to the truth. Poirot's mind, sharp as ever, began to weave the threads together, knowing that the weekend would unravel secrets far more dangerous than he had anticipated. Chapter 2. The Vanished Host. The dining room of Ashburn Manor glowed with the soft flicker of candlelight, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that precedes a storm, though no thunder rumbled outside. Hercule Poirot sat at the head of the table, his small, precise hands folded neatly before him. His mustache, immaculate as ever, his sharp eyes, like twin polished stones, darted from face to face, taking in the assembled guests with the quiet intensity of a predator sizing up its quarry. There were 9 in total, a curious assortment of strangers brought together by the mysterious invitation that had lured Poirot himself to this remote English estate. To his left sat Madame Claire Dubois, the retired actress, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her eyes still carrying the spark of a woman who had once commanded the stage. Beside her was Mr. Harold Finch, a nervous librarian with a habit of adjusting his spectacles every few seconds, as if the world might shift if he didn't. Across from him was Miss Evelyn Carver, a journalist with a sharp tongue and sharper eyes, her notebook never far from her hand. The others a dour solicitor named Mr. Reginald Thorne, a jovial art dealer called Mr. Percy Whitmore, a reserved botanist named Dr. Lydia Hawthorne, a young playwright named Mr. Julian Marsh, a retired colonel named Sir Charles Rutherford, and a cryptic widow named Mrs. Beatrice Langley sat, in varying states of unease. Their conversations stilted, their glances darting toward the empty chair at the opposite end of the table. The chair belonged to their host, Sir Edmund Ashburn, a man none of them had yet seen. The invitation had promised his presence, yet the hour for dinner had come and gone, and still he did not appear. The butler, a stooped figure named Mr. Grayson, moved silently about the room, refilling wine glasses with the precision of a metronome. Poirot noted the man's economy of movement, the way his eyes avoided meeting those of the guests. A man accustomed to secrets, Poirot thought. Mon Dieu, Poirot said at last, his voice cutting through the murmur of small talk like a blade. It is most irregular, is it not, that our host should keep us waiting? One does not invite such a distinguished company only to absent oneself. Madame Claire raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a faint, theatrical smile. Perhaps Sir Edmund enjoys a dramatic entrance. In my years on the stage, I learned that timing is everything. Or perhaps, Miss Carver interjected, her voice edged with impatience, he's decided we're not worth his time. I've heard Sir Edmund is a recluse. Perhaps he's changed his mind about this little gathering." "Nonsense," Sir Charles barked, his military bearing evident even in his dinner jacket. "A man of his standing wouldn't issue invitations on a whim. Something's delayed him, that's all." Mr. Finch fidgeted, his fingers brushing the rim of his spectacles. I read in the papers that Sir Edmund is a collector of rare books. Perhaps he's been detained by some literary discovery. He's said to have one of the finest collections in England." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A collector, you say? And what, Monsieur Finch, do you know of his collection?" Finch blushed, clearly uncomfortable under Poirot's scrutiny. "Only what I've read. First editions, manuscripts, that sort of thing. There's talk he owns an unpublished work by Agatha Christie herself." A ripple of interest passed through the table. Mrs. Langley, the widow, lifted her head, her dark veil shifting slightly to reveal a pair of piercing blue eyes. "An unpublished Christie. That would be worth a fortune. And no doubt a magnet for trouble." "Trouble?" Dr. Hawthorne asked, her voice cool and measured. "Surely a manuscript, however valuable, wouldn't warrant such a term." Mrs. Langley's lips thinned. "You'd be surprised, Doctor, what men will do for a prize they covet." Poirot tilted his head, his mind already weaving connections. The invitation had mentioned a secret tied to Agatha Christie, and now this talk of a manuscript. He was about to press further when Mr. Grayson re-entered the room, his face pale. "Pardon the interruption," the butler said, his voice trembling slightly, "but I've just checked Sir Edmund's study. He is not there, nor in his chambers. I fear something is amiss." A collective murmur rose from the guests. Poirot stood, his small frame commanding the room's attention. "Then we must ascertain his whereabouts at once. Monsieur Grayson, lead us to the study. The rest of you, remain here, unless I call for you." Miss Carver's eyes narrowed. "I'm not one to sit idly by, Monsieur Poirot. I'm coming with you." "As am I," Madame Claire declared, rising with a grace that belied her years. Poirot sighed inwardly but nodded. "Very well. But you will follow my instructions precisely." The study was at the far end of the manor. Down a corridor, lined with portraits of stern-faced Ashburns, glaring down from their gilded frames. The door was heavy oak, adorned with a single red rose tucked into the handle, a folded note pinned beneath it. Poirot plucked the note and read aloud, "The truth lies within." Most curious, he pushed the door open, revealing a room that seemed frozen in time. A massive desk dominated the space, its surface cluttered with papers, ink bottles, and a single candelabrum flickering weakly. Bookshelves lined the walls, groaning under the weight of leather-bound tomes. The air smelled of old paper and wax. Poirot's eyes swept the room, noting the details. A half-finished glass of brandy on the desk, a fountain pen lying uncapped, a chair slightly askew. "He was here recently," Poirot murmured. "But where has he gone?" Miss Carver, ignoring his earlier instructions, began rifling through the papers on the desk. "Look at this," she said, holding up a letter. "It's addressed to Sir Edmund from someone claiming to know the whereabouts of a lost Christie manuscript. It's dated last week." Poirot took the letter, his fingers brushing the crisp parchment. The handwriting was elegant, almost feminine, and the words were carefully chosen. "The secret you seek is closer than you think, but beware, some truths are better left buried." No signature. Madame Claire peered over his shoulder. "Melodramatic, don't you think? It's like something out of one of Agatha's novels." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone thoughtful. "But in the novels of Madame Christie, such warnings often precede a crime." Mr. Grayson hovered by the door, his hands clasped tightly. Sir Edmund was obsessed with that manuscript. He spoke of little else these past months. He believed it held a secret that could change the literary world. Poirot's mustache twitched. "And did he share the secret with anyone?" The butler hesitated. "Not with me, sir, but he argued with Miss Carver 2 days ago. I overheard them in the garden. She was pressing him about his finances." Miss Carver's cheeks flushed. "I'm a journalist, Monsieur Poirot. It's my job to ask questions. Sir Edmund was cagey about his investments, and I suspected he was hiding something. That's all." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, but he said nothing. Instead, he turned to the bookshelf behind the desk, his fingers trailing along the spines. One book, a worn copy of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, seemed slightly out of place, its edge protruding. He pulled it gently, and with a soft click, the bookshelf shifted, revealing a narrow passage. "Monsieur Poirot," whispered. "A secret room, most intriguing." The passage led to a small, windowless chamber, its walls lined with more books and a single desk. On it lay an open journal, its pages filled with Sir Edmund's precise handwriting. Poirot scanned the entries, his eyes narrowing. "Listen to this," he said, reading aloud. "The manuscript is real. I have seen it, held it. But its revelation will bring danger. There are those who would kill to keep it hidden." Madame Claire gasped. He knew he was in danger. "It appears so," Poirot said. "But what is this manuscript, and why is it worth such risk?" Before anyone could answer, a piercing scream echoed through the manor, shattering the stillness. Poirot rushed back to the corridor, followed by Miss Carver and Madame Claire. The other guests had gathered in the hall, their faces pale. "It came from the garden," Mr. Finch stammered, pointing toward the French doors. Poirot led the way, his steps brisk despite his small stature. The garden was shrouded in mist, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and roses. The beam of a lantern, carried by Mr. Grayson, cut through the fog, revealing a grim sight. Sir Edmund Ashburn lay sprawled on the grass, his eyes staring blankly at the sky. A fountain pen was clutched in his rigid hand, its nib stained with ink and something darker. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers examining the pen. "He has been dead no more than an hour," he said. "The cause is not yet clear, but the pen, it is significant." Nessie-P.A. Miss Carver crouched beside him, her journalist's instincts overriding her shock. "Look at his coat pocket," she said, pointing to a scrap of paper protruding from the fabric. Poirot retrieved it carefully. It was a torn page, scrawled with a single word in Sir Edmund's hand. "Betrayed." The guests crowded closer, their whispers rising like a chorus of ghosts. Poirot stood, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Amos," he said, his voice steady. "It is clear that Sir Edmund Ashburn has been murdered, and the killer, I am certain, is among us." A gasp rippled through the group. Sir Charles's face reddened. "Preposterous. You can't possibly know that." "Oh, but I do," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. The locked study, the hidden passage, the note, the penal point to a plan most deliberate. And now, we are trapped here by the storm that approaches. There will be no leaving Ashburn Manor until the truth is unveiled. He turned, his gaze sweeping over the guests, each face a mask of fear, guilt, or defiance. The game, Ms. Amos, has begun, and Hercule Poirot does not lose. The storm broke an hour later, rain lashing the manor's windows like the fists of an angry god. The guests had retreated to the drawing room, their earlier attempts at civility replaced by suspicion. Poirot remained in the garden, shielded by an umbrella held by the stoic Mr. Grayson, as he examined the scene further. The pen in Sir Edmund's hand was no ordinary writing instrument. Its weight suggested a hidden compartment, though Poirot did not open it yet. Timing, as Madame Claire had said, was everything. He returned to the study, where Miss Carver and Madame Claire awaited him. The journalist was pacing, her notebook now filled with hasty scribbles. "This is bigger than I thought," she said. Sir Edmund wasn't just a collector. He was obsessed with proving something about Agatha Christie that could ruin reputations. Poirot raised an eyebrow. "And you, Mademoiselle Carver, what did you hope to gain by arguing with him?" She bristled. "A story. That's my job. I heard rumors he was funding his collection with questionable money. I wanted the truth." "The truth," Poirot mused, "is a dangerous thing. Tell me, Madame Claire, what do you make of this?" He gestured to the secret room, where the journal still lay open. The actress's eyes softened, a flicker of nostalgia crossing her face. "It reminds me of a play I once performed in, The Hidden Door. The set had a secret passage, just like It was based on an unpublished Christie story, you know. Sir Edmund was fascinated by it. He came to every performance. Poirot's mustache twitched, and this plate revealed something of the manuscript. Only hints, she said, but Sir Edmund believed it was more than fiction. He thought it held a key to a real secret. Before Poirot could press further, Mr. Finch burst into the room, his spectacles fogged with panic. "Monsieur Poirot, you must come quickly. There's something in the library." The library was a cavernous room, its shelves towering to the ceiling, filled with the musty scent of old books. Mr. Finch led them to a glass case, its lock shattered. Inside, a space meant for a single book was empty. "It was a first edition," Finch stammered. "The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. Sir Edmund showed it to me yesterday. He said it was priceless." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And now it is gone. Most convenient, is it not, that a book connected to our clues should vanish?" Miss Carver's pen paused. "You think the killer took it?" "I think," Poirot said, "that nothing in this matter happens by chance. The rose, the note, the pen, the journal, the missing book haul, are pieces of a puzzle, and Hercule Poirot will assemble them." As the guests gathered once more, the storm outside grew fiercer, the wind howling like a warning. Poirot stood before them, his small frame radiating authority. "Mes amis," he said, "we are in the midst of a game most deadly. Sir Edmund Ashburn sought to unveil a secret, and for that he paid with his life. But the secret remains, hidden in this manor, and I will find it. And when I do, the killer will be revealed." The room fell silent, save for the crackle of the fire and the relentless strum of the rain. Poirot's eyes lingered on each guest, searching for the telltale flicker of guilt. The truth, he knew, was close, but in the shadowed halls of Ashburn Manor, truth was a dangerous prey, and the hunter would need all his wits to capture it. Chapter 3. The cipher in ink. The rain lashed against the tall, arched windows of Ashburn Manor, each drop a staccato note in a symphony of unease. Inside, the dining room was a tableau of strained faces, the guests' eyes darting between one another as if searching for a telltale sign of guilt. The air was thick with the scent of polished mahogany and the faint tang of fear. Hercule Poirot sat at the head of the long table, his small, immaculate figure a beacon of calm amidst a storm both literal and metaphorical. His hands, gloved in pristine white, rested lightly on the table, but his eyes, sharp as a hawk's, missed nothing. The discovery of Sir Edmund Ashburn's body in the garden had cast a pall over the evening. The host, whose absence had puzzled the guests during dinner, was now the centerpiece of a grim mystery. Found sprawled beneath a yew tree, his lifeless hand clutched a silver fountain pen, its nib stained with ink as dark as the night outside. The police had been summoned, but the storm had severed the telephone lines and turned the roads to mud, trapping the guests in the manor with a killer among them. Poirot's gaze settled on the pen, which now lay on a velvet cloth before him, its surface gleaming under the chandelier's light. The guests in total, each a stranger to the others, watched him with a mix of curiosity and dread. There was Madame Claire Duval, the retired actress whose elegance belied a nervous tremor in her hands. Mr. Harold Finch, the librarian, with the penchant for fidgeting with his spectacles. Miss Evelyn Hart, the sharp-tongued journalist whose pen was as quick as her wit. Dr. Leonard Grayson, a reserved physician with an unsettlingly steady gaze, and others, each with their own secrets, their own reasons for accepting the cryptic invitation to Ashburn Manor. "Mes amis, Poirot," began, his voice smooth and measured, cutting through the murmurs like a knife through silk. "We are faced with a puzzle most intricate. Sir Edmund Ashburn, our absent host, is no more. Yet, in his final moments, he left us a clue." He lifted the pen delicately, holding it aloft as if it were a sacred relic. "This pen, it is not merely an instrument of writing. It is a key." A murmur rippled through the room. Miss Hart leaned forward, her green eyes narrowing. "A key to what, Monsieur Poirot?" "A confession, a treasure." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Patience, Mademoiselle Hart. The little gray cells, they work methodically. This pen, it contains a secret. He turned the pen over in his hands, his fingers tracing its smooth surface until they found a nearly imperceptible seam. With a gentle twist, the barrel split open, revealing a tiny compartment within. A rolled slip of paper, no larger than a matchstick, tumbled onto the table. The guests gasped, leaning closer, their shadows merging on the polished wood. Poirot unfurled the paper with care, revealing a series of numbers and letters scrawled in Sir Edmund's precise hand. For 1 to 198518, ACKOID. The ink was fresh, the edges of the paper unyellowed, suggesting it had been written mere hours before Sir Edmund's death. A code, Dr. Grayson said, his voice low but authoritative. A cipher, perhaps. Precisement, Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. But a cipher is only as strong as its key. And I believe, Ms. Amos, that the key lies in the mind of our departed host, and in the works of the great Agatha Christie herself. The mention of Agatha Christie stirred the room. The guests exchanged glances, some puzzled, others wary. Mr. Finch adjusted his spectacles, his fingers trembling slightly. Agatha Christie. But what has she to do with this? Poirot's gaze swept over the group, lingering on each face. Sir Edmund's journal, discovered in the secret room behind the bookshelf, spoke of a connection to Madame Christie. A secret, perhaps, tied to her works. And this code, he tapped a slip of paper. It references her most ingenious novel, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. Miss Hart scoffed, though her voice held a trace of unease. A novel. You're saying our host was killed over a book? Not just any book, Mademoiselle Poirot said, his tone sharp yet polite. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd is a masterpiece of deception, a story where the truth hides in plain sight. And this code, it suggests that Sir Edmund wished to point us toward a truth equally concealed. He held up the paper, the numbers and letters stark against the candlelight. The word Ackroyd is clear, a nod to the novel. But the numbers 4, 1 to 198518, they are less obvious. Let us consider them. Poirot's mind, a machine of precision, began to turn. He paced slowly before the table, his polished shoes clicking softly on the parquet floor. If we assign each letter of the alphabet a number as 1, B as 2, and so forth, then 4 is D, 12 is L, 19 is S, 8 is H, 5 is E, and 18 is R. Together, they spelled Delshire. The guests frowned, the word meaningless. Madame Duval tilted her head, her silver hair catching the light. It's nonsense, Monsieur Poirot, a jumble. Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes twinkling. Or perhaps it is a name, a place, or a clue yet to be understood. But consider this, the numbers correspond to letters in the alphabet, and the word Ackroyd suggests a literary connection. Let us hypothesize that the cipher points to a specific passage in The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. Mr. Finch cleared his throat, his voice hesitant. I've read the novel, Monsieur Poirot. It's a complex tale, but I don't recall any DLSHER or anything similar. Poirot nodded, undeterred. Then we must look deeper. The novel is famous for its narrator, a man who conceals his guilt. Perhaps Sir Edmund saw himself in this role, or perhaps he suspected another of playing such a part. The room fell, silent, the weight of Poirot's words settling over the guests. Suspicion hung in the air like smoke, curling around each person. Miss Hart, who had been scribbling notes in a small leather-bound book, looked up sharply. You're saying the killer is one of us? Poirot's eyes met hers, unflinching. Oui, mademoiselle. The killer is among us, and this cipher is the first step to unmasking them. A sudden clap of thunder rattled the windows, and several guests flinched. The storm outside seemed to mirror the tension within. Poirot placed the slip of paper back on the table, his movements deliberate. We must search the manor for further clues. Sir Edmund was a man of secrets, and this pen, this cipher, is but the beginning. I propose we divide our efforts. Some shall examine the study, others the garden where the body was found. I, Hercule Poirot, shall remain here to ponder the cipher further. The guests hesitated, their reluctance palpable. Dr. Grayson stood, his tall frame casting a long shadow. "I'll go to the garden. I'm no stranger to death, and I might notice something the rest of you miss." Miss Hart snapped her notebook shut. "I'll take the study. If there's a connection to Christie's work, I'll find it. I've spent years digging up stories no one once told." Madame Duval rose gracefully, though her hands betrayed a slight tremble. "I shall accompany Mademoiselle Hart. 2 pairs of eyes are better than one." Mr. Finch, however, remained seated, his face pale. "I'd rather stay here, Monsieur Poirot. I'm no detective, and the thought of traipsing through a stormy garden or poking around a dead man's study." Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Very well, Monsieur Finch. You shall assist me here. The rest of you, be vigilant. The killer is cunning, and they will not hesitate to strike again if threatened." As the guests dispersed, Poirot sat back, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. The cipher lay before him, its numbers and letters a riddle that danced just beyond his grasp. He closed his eyes, letting his little gray cells work. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd was a novel of misdirection, its brilliance lying in the narrator's duplicity. Was Sir Edmund suggesting that someone here was playing a similar game? And what of Delsuer? Was it a name, an anagram, or something else entirely? The clock on the mantel struck midnight, its chimes echoing through the room. Mr. Finch fidgeted, his spectacles slipping down his nose. "Monsieur Poirot, do you really think the killer is one of us? I mean, we're all strangers here, brought together by that odd invitation." Poirot opened his eyes, fixing Finch with a piercing stare. "Strangers, but not without purpose. Each of you was chosen, Monsieur Finch, for a reason. The invitation spoke of revelations, and I believe Sir Edmund intended to unveil a secret that someone here could not allow to see the light." Finch swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "But who, and why?" "That," Poirot said, tapping the cipher, "is what we shall discover. Now, tell me, Monsieur Finch, what is your connection to Agatha Christie?" Finch blinked, startled. "Me? Why, none, really. I'm just a librarian. I've read her books, of course, who hasn't? But I'm no expert." Poirot's mustache twitched again, a sign that he was not entirely convinced. "And yet you were invited here, to a manor where a secret tied to Madame Christie lies at the heart of a murder." Curious Ned. Before Finch could respond, a sharp cry echoed from the direction of the study. Poirot was on his feet in an instant, his small frame moving with surprising speed. Finch followed, his steps hesitant. They reached the study to find Miss Hart and Madame Duval standing over a desk, their faces pale. On the desk lay an open copy of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, its pages marked with red ink. "Look at this," Miss Hart said, her voice trembling with excitement or fear. Poirot could not yet tell which. It was hidden under a false bottom in the drawer. Poirot approached, his eyes scanning the book. The marked passage described the moment when the narrator, Dr. Shepard, reveals his own guilt, a twist that had shocked readers decades ago. But the red ink formed a new message, scrawled in a hurried hand. "The truth is in the voice that lies." Poirot's brow furrowed. "The voice that lies," he murmured. "In the novel, the narrator's voice deceives us all. But here, in this manor, whose voice is false?" Madame Duval clutched her locket, her knuckles white. "Monsieur Poirot, this is madness. First, a cipher. Now this. Are we all to be suspects?" "Not suspects, Madame," Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm. "Pieces of a puzzle. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall fit them together." He turned back to the book, his mind racing. The cipher, the novel, the message, they were threads in a tapestry of deceit. But what was the secret Sir Edmund had died to protect, and why was it worth killing for? As the storm raged on, Poirot felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. The killer was close, watching, waiting, and the cipher in ink was only the beginning. Chapter 4. Shadows of the Past. The storm that had descended upon Ashburn Manor was a tempest of both nature and human deceit. Rain lashed against the tall, arched windows of the dining hall, where the guests sat in uneasy silence, their faces illuminated by the flickering glow of a chandelier that swayed gently in the draft. Hercule Poirot, seated at the head of the table, observed each guest with the precision of a watchmaker examining the gears of a complex timepiece. The absence of their host, Sir Edmund Ashburn, whose body had been discovered in the garden mere hours ago, hung over the room like a pall. The coded message, found in the pen clutched in his cold hand, had set Poirot's mind alight, and the reference to the murder of Roger Ackroyd suggested a mind both literary and sinister at work. The retired actress, Madame Claire Dubois, toyed with the stem of her wineglass, her scarlet nails catching the light. Across from her, Mr. Harold Grayson, the nervous librarian, adjusted his spectacles for the 10th time, his fingers trembling as he did so. Miss Evelyn Hart, the sharp-tongued journalist, sat with her arms crossed, her eyes darting between her fellow guests as if she were mentally composing a headline for the evening's grim events. The remaining guests, a dour botanist named Dr. Leonard Finch, a young novelist called Miss Beatrice Lyle, and a retired colonel, Arthur Pendleton, each bore the weight of their own secrets, though none had yet revealed them to Poirot's satisfaction. Voice, smooth and measured, cut through the tension. Ms. Amos, it is clear that Sir Edmund's death was no accident, nor was it a whim of fate. The coded message, the pen, the reference to Madame Christie's work, these are the threads of a tapestry woven by a deliberate hand. I propose we begin by understanding why each of you was invited to this manor. What connection do you share with Sir Edmund, and what might you know of this secret he promised to unveil? The guests exchanged wary glances, each waiting for another to speak first. It was Madame Claire who broke the silence, her voice husky with years of stagecraft. I barely knew Sir Edmund, she said, waving a dismissive hand. He was a fan, nothing more. Sent me letters about my performances, particularly my role in The Hollow. He claimed it was the finest adaptation of Christie's work he'd ever seen. Flattery, I thought, until his invitation arrived. Poirot's mustache twitched. And yet, Madame, you traveled across the country to attend a weekend hosted by a man you barely knew. Why? Her eyes flickered, but she recovered with a practiced smile. Curiosity, Monsieur Poirot, and perhaps the promise of a good story. A weekend at a grand manor, secrets to be revealed, who could resist? Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Mr. Grayson, who seemed to shrink under the scrutiny. And you, Monsieur Grayson, what brought you here? The librarian cleared his throat, his voice barely above a whisper. I worked for years at Christie's publisher. You see, Sir Edmund contacted me about some rare manuscripts he'd acquired. He said he needed an expert to authenticate them. I thought it was a professional opportunity, nothing more. Manuscripts. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. Of Madame Christie's work, perhaps. Grayson nodded, his face pale. He mentioned rumors of a lost novel, something she wrote but never published. I thought it was nonsense. Publishers hear such tales all the time, but Sir Edmund was insistent. He said he had proof. The room stirred, whispers passing between the guests like a breeze through dry leaves. Miss Hart, the journalist, scoffed. A lost Christie novel. That's the kind of story that sells papers, not lives. Sir Edmund was a collector, not a scholar. If he had such a thing, he'd have flaunted it, not died for it. Poirot turned to her, his tone sharp. And you, Mademoiselle Hart, you were seen arguing with Sir Edmund only days ago. What was the nature of your disagreement? Her lips tightened, but she met his gaze defiantly. He was meddling in things he didn't understand. I was investigating his finances, rumors of shady dealings with literary estates. He didn't like my questions, but I don't back down from a story. That's all I'll say. Poirot's eyes narrowed, but before he could press further, a sudden crack of thunder shook the manor, and the chandelier's light sputtered, plunging the room into darkness. Gasps and a clatter of cutlery filled the air. When the lights flickered back on moments later, the tension had thickened, and Poirot noticed something amiss. A valuable first-edition copy of Murder on the Orient Express, which had been displayed on a side table, was gone. Mon Dieu! Poirot exclaimed, rising to his feet. The booklet has vanished in the blink of an eye. This is no coincidence, Ms. Amos. Someone in this room seized the moment of darkness to act. The guests protested, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of denial. Colonel Pendleton, his military bearing intact, despite the hour, barked, "This is absurd. Are we to be accused of thievery now, as well as murder?" "Not accused," Colonel Poirot replied, his voice calm but firm. "Observed, the thief is among us, and the theft is no petty crime. That book, I suspect, holds a clue to Sir Edmund's secret. We must find it." The search began at once, with Poirot directing the guests to check the dining hall and adjacent rooms. As they scattered, he lingered near the side table, his keen eyes scanning the polished surface. A faint smudge of ink caught his attention, a smudge that matched the shade of Sir Edmund's pen. Kneeling, he examined the floor and found a single, torn page tucked beneath the table's leg, its edges ragged as if ripped in haste. The page bore a single line in Christie's unmistakable prose. "The truth is never what it seems, but it is always there, hidden in plain sight." Poirot's mind raced. The line was not from Murder on the Orient Express, but it resonated with the coded message from the pen. Was it a clue to the killer's motive, or a taunt? He pocketed the page, determined to keep it from prying eyes until he could decipher its meaning. As the guests returned, empty-handed and frustrated, Poirot noticed Madame Claire's hands trembling slightly, her composure fraying. "Madame," he said softly, "you seem unwell. Is there something you wish to share?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "It's nothing, monsieur. Just the storm, the murder, the theft. It's all so unsettling." But Poirot was not convinced. Her eyes had lingered on the side table where the book had been, and he sensed she knew more than she let on. He resolved to watch her closely, but for now, he turned his attention to the group. "The missing book," he announced, "is no mere trinket. It is a piece of the puzzle, and its theft suggests that someone here fears what it might reveal. I propose we retire for the night, but rest assured, Ms. Amos, Hercule Poirot does not sleep when a mystery is afoot." The guests dispersed, their footsteps echoing in the vast halls of the manor. Poirot, however, did not retire. Instead, he made his way to the library, where Sir Edmund's collection of Christie's works was housed. The room was a treasure trove of literary history, its shelves lined with first editions and annotated manuscripts. As he scanned the shelves, his fingers brushed against a volume of The Mysterious Affair at Styles, and he noticed a faint indentation in the spine, a sign it had been handled recently. Opening the book, Poirot found a folded letter tucked between its pages. The letter, written in Sir Edmund's hand, was addressed to an unknown recipient. "The manuscript is real, and I intend to reveal it. The society will not silence me. Forgive me, but the truth must out." The mention of a society intrigued Poirot. Was Sir Edmund part of a clandestine group guarding Agatha Christie's secrets? And had his decision to break their silence cost him his life? The letter offered no names, but it confirmed Grayson's story of a lost manuscript and suggested a motive rooted in literary jealousy or betrayal. As Poirot pondered, a soft creak interrupted his thoughts. He turned to see Miss Beatrice Lyle, the young novelist, standing in the doorway, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "I couldn't sleep. I heard something in the library earlier, before the book went missing. A rustling, like someone searching." "And why did you not speak of this before, mademoiselle?" Poirot asked, his tone gentle but probing. She bit her lip. "I didn't want to seem paranoid, but after the book vanished, I thought, maybe, it was important. I think someone was looking for something specific, not just stealing for the sake of it." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging her words. "Merci, Mademoiselle Lyle. Your observation is most valuable. Return to your room and say nothing of this to the others." As she left, Poirot's gaze returned to the shelves. The library held more secrets, he was certain, but the hour was late, and the storm showed no sign of abating. He slipped a letter into his pocket alongside the torn page and made his way to his room, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The next morning, the manor was abuzz with whispers. The guests gathered in the drawing room, their faces drawn from lack of sleep. Poirot entered, his demeanor calm but authoritative. "Ms. Amos," he began, "the theft of the book is but one thread in a larger web. I have found evidence that suggests Sir Edmund's death is tied to a secret. He intended to reveal a secret that threatens someone in this room. I urge you to speak now, before another tragedy strikes." The room fell silent, but Poirot's eyes caught a flicker of movement. Dr. Finch, the botanist, had shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Monsieur Finch," Poirot said, his voice like a blade, "you have been silent thus far. Perhaps you have something to contribute." Finch's jaw tightened, but he shook his head. "I'm a scientist, Monsieur Poirot, not a storyteller. I came here to study the manor's rare plants, nothing more." "And yet," Poirot countered, "you were seen near the library last night, shortly before the book vanished. A curious coincidence." Finch's face reddened, but before he could respond, a piercing scream echoed through the manor. The guests leapt to their feet, following the sound to the grand staircase. There, at the foot of the stairs, lay a crumpled figure, Miss Hart, the journalist, unconscious. A trickle of blood seeping from a wound on her temple. Poirot knelt beside her, checking her pulse. "She lives," he announced, "but she has been struck. Quickly, fetch a doctor." As Colonel Pendleton rushed to summon help, Poirot examined the scene. A heavy candlestick lay nearby, its base smeared with blood. The attack had been swift and deliberate, but why target Miss Hart? Had she uncovered something in her investigation of Sir Edmund's finances? Or was she, too, a threat to the killer's plans? As the guests crowded around, Poirot's mind turned to the torn page and the letter. The line from the book, "The truth is never what it seems, but it is always there, hidden in plain sight," echoed in his thoughts. The killer was playing a game, leaving clues in the open while concealing their true intent, and Poirot, with his little gray cells, was determined to unravel it. The chapter closed with Miss Hart being carried to her room, her fate uncertain. Poirot stood alone on the staircase, the weight of the mystery pressing upon him. The storm raged on, and the manor seemed to pulse with secrets, each one a shadow of the past waiting to be brought into the light. Chapter 5. The actress's secret. The rain lashed against the tall windows of Ashbourne Manor, each drop a staccato note in the symphony of the storm that had trapped Hercule Poirot and the eclectic gathering of guests within its ancient walls. The air in the grand dining room was thick with unease, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows that danced like specters across the mahogany table. The absence of their host, Sir Edmund Ashbourne, whose lifeless body had been discovered in the garden the previous night, hung over the gathering like a guillotine. Poirot, seated at the head of the table, sipped his tisane, his sharp eyes scanning the faces of the guests. Each a potential player in this deadly drama. Madame Claire Duval, the retired actress, sat to his left, her silver hair gleaming under the chandelier, her posture a study in practiced elegance despite the tremor in her hands. Across from her, Mr. Harold Finch, the nervous librarian, fidgeted with his spectacles, his gaze darting to the windows as if expecting the storm to reveal some new horror. Miss Evelyn Ward, the sharp-tongued journalist, leaned back in her chair, her lips curled in a skeptical smirk, while Dr. Leonard Baxter, a retired physician with a penchant for rare books, traced the rim of his wineglass with a thoughtful finger. The remaining guests, Miss Beatrice Lyle, a quiet botanist, and Mr. Victor Crane, a solicitor with a penchant for secrecy, sat in uneasy silence, their eyes occasionally meeting Poirot's with a mixture of curiosity and dread. The discovery of Sir Edmund's body, a fountain pen clutched in his cold hand, had shaken the manor's fragile calm. The pen, as Poirot had revealed, concealed a coded message, a tantalizing clue pointing to Agatha Christie's, the murder of Roger Ackroyd. The implications were clear. The killer was not only among them, but was weaving a narrative, inspired by the Queen of Mystery herself. The locked study, the cryptic note, and now the murder roll were threads in a tapestry Poirot was determined to unravel. "Ms. Amos," Poirot began, his voice cutting through the murmur of the storm, "we are, I fear, in the midst of a most intricate puzzle. Sir Edmund's death is no mere accident. nor is it an act of passion. It is calculated, deliberate, and tied to a secret he intended to reveal. I urge you to speak freely, for silence is the ally of the guilty." Madame Claire's fingers tightened around her napkin. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice a melodic contralto that carried the weight of 1,000 performances. "I cannot imagine why anyone would wish Sir Edmund harm. He was a generous man, a patron of the arts, a lover of literature. Surely this is some tragic misunderstanding." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his skepticism. "Madame, generosity does not preclude enemies. Sir Edmund's journal, which I examined in the secret room behind the bookshelf, spoke of a revelation tied to Agatha Christie, a revelation that, I suspect, threatened someone in this very room." A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Miss Ward, the journalist, leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with the hunger of a predator scenting a story. "A revelation? What sort of revelation, Monsieur Poirot? Was it about money, power, or something more literary?" Poirot's gaze lingered on her, assessing. "That, Mademoiselle Ward, is what I intend to discover. But I am curious your argument with Sir Edmund 2 days ago. What was its nature?" Miss Ward's smirk faltered, but she recovered quickly. "A professional disagreement. I was researching Sir Edmund's collection of rare manuscripts for an article. He was cagey about certain items. I pressed him, and he took offense. Nothing more." "Nothing more," Poirot repeated, his tone deceptively mild. "Yet you were seen leaving his study in a state of agitation. Perhaps you learned something he did not wish you to know." Before Miss Ward could respond, a piercing scream shattered the tension, echoing from the direction of the manor's sprawling gardens. The guests froze, their faces pale in the candlelight. Poirot rose swiftly, his small frame radiating authority. "Remain here," he commanded, though his eyes invited Captain Hastings, his loyal friend who had accompanied him to the manor, to follow. The storm had relented slightly, leaving a drizzle that soaked Poirot's coat as he and Hastings hurried toward the lake at the edge of the estate. The scream had come from there, and as they approached, the beam of Hastings' torch revealed a grim scene. The manor's groundskeeper, Mr. Thomas Greaves, lay sprawled on the muddy bank, his lifeless eyes staring at the sky. In his clenched fist was a scrap of paper, the ink smudged but legible. Poirot knelt, ignoring the mud that stained his pristine trousers, and carefully extracted the paper. A single word was scrawled upon it: betrayal. "Good Lord, Poirot," Hastings whispered, his voice thick with horror. "Another murder. This is madness." Poirot's eyes narrowed as he studied the body. "Not madness, mon ami, but method. This poor man was no random victim. He knew something or someone feared. He did." The guests, disregarding Poirot's instructions, had followed and now gathered at a distance, their faces a gallery of shock and suspicion. Madame Claire clutched her shawl, her eyes wide with fear. "Thomas was a good man," she murmured. "He tended the gardens for years. Who could do such a thing?" Poirot stood, his gaze sweeping over the group. "That, madame, is the question, and I suspect the answer lies in what Monsieur Greaves held in his hand. Betrayal. A word that carries weight, does it not? Who among you felt betrayed by Sir Edmund or by another?" The question hung unanswered, the silence broken only by the patter of rain. Poirot's mind, however, was already at work, piecing together the fragments of this deadly puzzle. The coded message in a pen, the reference to the murder of Roger Ackroyd, the missing first edition book, and now this second murder all pointed to a secret so profound it was worth killing for. But what was it, and how did it connect to Agatha Christie? Back in the manor, Poirot gathered the guests in the library, a cavernous room lined with bookshelves that reached the ceiling. The storm had resumed its fury, and the windows rattled as if protesting the secrets they guarded. Poirot paced before the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression one of intense concentration. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, "the death of Monsieur Greaves is no coincidence. He was killed to silence him, just as Sir Edmund was. The word betrayal suggests a motive rooted in trust broken, in confidences betrayed. I ask again, what do you know of Sir Edmund's plans? What secret did he intend to unveil? Mr. Finch, the librarian, adjusted his spectacles. Nervously, I only knew Sir Edmund through his collection. He was obsessed with Agatha Christie's works, particularly rumors of a lost manuscript. He once mentioned a play, an obscure one, that never saw the light of day. But he was secretive, even with me. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A play, you say? Interesting. And you, Madame Claire, as an actress of some renown, perhaps you know of such a play. Madame Claire hesitated, her fingers brushing the locket at her throat, a gesture Poirot had noted earlier. Yes, I suppose I must confess, she said at last, her voice trembling. Many years ago, I starred in a private performance of a play based on an unpublished story by Agatha Christie. It was called The Shadowed Veil. Sir Edmund was involved in its production, but it was never performed publicly. There was a scandal. The room fell silent, the guests leaning forward, their curiosity piqued. Poirot tilted his head, his mustache twitching. A scandal, madame. Of what nature? Madame Claire's eyes flickered with something like fear. The play was based on a manuscript Sir Edmund claimed was written by Agatha Christie herself. But there were doubts about its authenticity. Some said he had forged it, hoping to profit from her name. Others believed it was genuine but contained revelations that could damage reputations. The production was halted, and the manuscript vanished. I thought it was all forgotten, until Sir Edmund invited me here. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And this manuscript, madame, did it resurface? I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But Sir Edmund hinted that he had found it again. He said it held a secret that would rewrite the legacy of Agatha Christie. I begged him to let it be, but he was determined. The other guests exchanged uneasy glances. Miss Ward's pen scratched furiously in her notebook, while Dr. Baxter's brow furrowed in thought. Miss Lyle, the botanist, spoke for the first time, her voice soft but firm. Sir Edmund was no fool. If he believed in this manuscript, it must exist. But why kill for it? Poirot smiled faintly. A question most pertinent. Mademoiselle Lyle, a manuscript, even one by Agatha Christie, is merely paper and ink, but a secret within its pagosa, secret that threatens wealth, reputation, or power that is worth killing for. And I believe Monsieur Greaves knew of this secret, perhaps through his work on the estate. Hastings, standing by the door, cleared his throat. Poirot, could the groundskeeper have found something in the gardens? A hiding place, perhaps? Poirot nodded. Precisely, Hastings. Tomorrow, we shall search the grounds. But for now, I must ask you all to remain vigilant. The killer is cunning, and they will strike again if we do not act swiftly. As the guests dispersed to their rooms, Poirot lingered in the library, his eyes drawn to Madame Claire's locket, which she had clutched throughout her confession. He approached her as she prepared to leave, his voice gentle but firm. Madame, a word, if you please. The locket you wear it is of great significance, is it not? Her hand flew to the locket, her face palling. It's a keepsake, nothing more. Poirot's smile was knowing. And yet, it draws your touch when you speak of the past. May I see it? Reluctantly, Madame Claire unclasped the locket and handed it to him. Inside was a small photograph, faded but clear, a young Agatha Christie, her eyes bright with mischief, standing beside a man who bore a striking resemblance to a younger Sir Edmund. On the back of the photograph was a handwritten note to Claire. With gratitude for your silence. A.C. Poirot's heart quickened. Madame, this is no mere keepsake. It is a clue. Agatha Christie herself gave you this, did she not? And the silence. She thanked you for, what was it? Madame Claire's eyes filled with tears. It was so long ago. I swore never to speak of it. The play, The Shadowed Veil, was based on a true story of scandal involving a prominent family. Agatha wrote it as a warning, but Sir Edmund wanted to use it for his own gain. I convinced her to suppress it, to protect those involved. She gave me this locket as a token of her trust. Poirot handed the locket back, his mind racing. And now, madame, That trust has been betrayed. Sir Edmund sought to reveal what you and Agatha Christie buried, and someone, perhaps even you, would kill to keep it hidden." Madame Claire gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Me, Monsieur Poirot, I am no murderer." "Perhaps not," Poirot said, his tone enigmatic. "But secrets, madame, have a way of drawing blood. Bonne nuit." As she fled the room, Poirot turned to the fireplace, his reflection shimmering in the dying flames. The photograph, the play, the manuscript, all were pieces of a puzzle that pointed to a secret Agatha Christie had guarded with her life. And now, with 2 men dead and a killer among them, Poirot knew the stakes were higher than ever. The storm raged on, a fitting backdrop to the darkness within Ashburn Manor. Poirot's little gray cells worked tirelessly, weaving connections between the coded message, the missing book, the groundskeeper's death, and Madame Claire's revelation. The word betrayal echoed in his mind, a beacon guiding him toward the truth. Tomorrow, he would search the grounds, but tonight, he would watch and listen, for the killer was closing. Their next move was imminent. Chapter 6. The groundskeepers, clothed the morning mist, clung to the manicured lawns of Ashburn Manor, curling around the ancient oaks like a shroud. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the lake, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the damp earth, his eyes fixed on the still water that mirrored the gray sky above. The air was heavy with the scent of wet grass and something sharper, something metallic, like blood. The groundskeeper's body had been discovered just an hour ago, sprawled near the boathouse, his weathered hand clutching a scrap of paper with the word betrayal scrawled in hurried ink. The discovery had sent a fresh wave of unease through the manor's guests, their faces pale as they whispered behind gloved hands. Poirot, however, felt a spark of clarity amidst the chaos. This was no random act of violence. It was a piece of a larger puzzle, one he was determined to solve. Captain Hastings, ever loyal and slightly flustered, hovered at Poirot's side, his overcoat flapping in the breeze. "Ghastly business, Poirot," he muttered, glancing toward the boathouse where the police were cordoning off the scene. "First Sir Edmund, now this poor fellow. What's it all mean? And that word, betrayal, sounds like something out of one of Mrs. Christie's novels, doesn't it?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his amusement. "Mon ami, you are not wrong. But it is not merely like one of Madame Christie's novels. It is, I suspect, inspired by them. The killer weaves a tapestry of clues, each thread drawn from her works. This groundskeeper, this Monsieur Harold, he was not chosen at random. No, he knew something, and that knowledge cost him his life." Hastings frowned, adjusting his hat. "Knew something? About what? That missing manuscript the librarian mentioned, or something else entirely?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with that familiar intensity, the spark of his little gray cells at work. "Patience, Hastings. The truth reveals itself in layers, like an onion. We must peel them carefully. Come, let us examine this boathouse. There is something here. I feel it." The boathouse was a weathered structure, its wooden planks silvered by time and the elements. It leaned slightly toward the lake, as if yearning to slip into the water's embrace. The police had already removed Harold's body, but attention was not on the spot where the man had fallen. Instead, he circled the boathouse, his gloved fingers brushing against the rough wood, pausing at a faint carving near the door. It was barely visible, a series of lines and curves, etched with a knife's precision. Poirot knelt, his monocle catching the weak sunlight as he studied the marks. "Hastings, regard as Chetty," he exclaimed, beckoning his friend closer. "This is no idle vandalism. It is a map to something hidden within the manor." Hastings squinted at the carving, his brow furrowing. "A map? It looks like a child's scribble to me. How can you be sure?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Because, mon cher, I have seen such things before. The killer is clever, but not cleverer than Poirot. This map, it points to a location within the manor, and I suspect it is tied to the manuscript we seek. The groundskeeper, he was not merely a servant, he was a guardian of secrets." Inside the boathouse, the air was damp and musty, the scent of old wood mingling with the faint temps of lake water. Poirot's eyes darted across the cluttered interior fishing nets, rusted tools, a small rowboat tipped on its side. His attention settled on a wooden panel at the far end, its edges slightly misaligned, as if it had been recently disturbed. He tapped it lightly with his cane, and a hollow sound echoed back. "Aha!" Poirot's voice was triumphant. "Hastings assist me. This panel, it conceals something." Together, they pried the panel loose, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside was a small leather pouch, its surface worn but intact. Poirot opened it carefully, extracting a folded piece of parchment. As he unfolded it, his eyes widened. The parchment was a detailed sketch of Ashburn Manor's west wing, with a single room marked by a crimson X. Below the sketch was a handwritten note. "The vault lies beneath the shadow of the Nile." Hastings gasped. "The Nile? That's from Death on the Nile, isn't it? One of Christie's best, if you ask me." "But what does it mean?" Poirot's fingers traced the words, his mind racing. "It means, mon ami, that our killer is not only inspired by Madame Christie, but is using her stories as a cipher. Death on the Nile, a tale of passion, betrayal, and hidden truths. The vault, it must be hidden in the West Wing, beneath something symbolic of the Nile. Perhaps a statue, a painting, or," he paused, his eyes narrowing, "or a fountain. Yes, a fountain. The Manor's West Wing has a courtyard with a fountain, does it not?" Hastings nodded eagerly. "Right you are, Poirot. I saw it yesterday, a grand thing, with carvings of reeds and birds. Could that be it?" "There is only one way to find out," Poirot replied, folding the parchment and tucking it into his pocket. "Come, we return to the manor. The guests, they grow restless, and the killer grows bolder. We must act swiftly." Back at Ashburn Manor, the atmosphere was thick with suspicion. The guests had gathered in the drawing room, their voices a low hum of accusations and denials. Madame Claire, the retired actress, sat poised in a velvet armchair, her eyes darting nervously as she sipped a glass of sherry. The journalist, Mr. Roland Pierce, paced near the fireplace, his sharp features taut with frustration. The librarian, Miss Evelyn Ward, clutched a handkerchief, her face pale as she whispered to her assistant, a mousy young woman named Miss Clara. The other guests, a dour professor, a wealthy industrialist, and a retired colonel, sat in tense silence, their eyes flicking toward Poirot as he entered. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a knife. "I have made a discovery that brings us closer to the truth. The groundskeeper, Monsieur Harold, was not a mere victim of chance. He was killed because he knew of a secret hidden within this very manor." A gasp rippled through the room. Madame Claire's glass trembled in her hand. "A secret?" she asked, her voice husky. "What kind of secret?" Poirot's gaze swept over the guests, lingering on each face. "A vault, Mies Amos. A vault that holds something of great value. Perhaps the very manuscript Sir Edmund sought to reveal. And I believe it is hidden in the West Wing, beneath the fountain in the courtyard." Roland Pierce stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing. "A vault? That's absurd. This is a manor, not a bank. And what's this about a manuscript? Are you saying Sir Edmund was killed over a book?" "Not just any book," Poirot replied, his tone measured. "A manuscript by Madame Agatha Christie herself, one that has never seen the light of day. Its existence threatens someone in this room, someone who will stop at nothing to keep it hidden." Miss Evelyn Ward's handkerchief fluttered to the floor. "That's preposterous," she stammered. "I worked for Christie's publisher, and I never heard of such a thing. It's a myth, a rumor." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Is it, mademoiselle, or is it a truth you wish to deny?" "The groundskeeper's map leads us to the vault, and I intend to find it. But first, I must ask where were each of you this morning when Monsieur Harold met his end?" The room erupted in protests, each guest offering their alibi with varying degrees of conviction. Madame Claire claimed she was rehearsing lines in her room, alone. Roland Pierce insisted he was writing in the library, though no one could confirm it. Miss Ward and her assistant, Clara, said they were cataloging books in the study, but their stories diverged on the timing. The professor, industrialist, and Colonel offered vague accounts of morning walks and breakfast. Their details suspiciously thin. Poirot listened, his eyes never leaving their faces. "Very well," he said at last. "Your words, they are noted. But words, they can lie. The truth, it lies in the vault. Let us go to the West Wing." The West Wing's courtyard was a forgotten corner of the manor, its cobblestones overgrown with moss. At its center stood the fountain, a magnificent structure of marble and bronze. Reeds and lotus flowers were carved into its base, their delicate forms catching the light. A bronze heron stood at the fountain's peak, its beak poised as if to drink from the bubbling water. Poirot circled the fountain, his cane tapping against the stone. "The shadow of the Nile," he murmured. "The map spoke of a vault beneath this fountain. Hastings, do you see anything unusual?" Hastings, ever eager to help, knelt beside the fountain, his hands brushing over the carvings. "These reeds," he said, frowning. "One of them feels loose, like it's not part of the stone." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Bean, jaw, Hastings. Press it, carefully." Hastings pressed the carving, and a low grinding sound echoed through the courtyard. The fountain's base shifted, revealing a narrow stone staircase descending into darkness. The guests, who had followed at a cautious distance, gasped in unison. "Good heavens!" the colonel exclaimed, gripping his cane. "A secret passage, just like in a novel." "Indeed," Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. "But this is no fiction. Stay here, Mies Amos. Hastings and I will investigate." The staircase was steep and damp, the air growing colder with each step. Poirot's flashlight cast long shadows on the stone walls, revealing faint carvings of Egyptian motif sinks, scarabs, and the flowing lines of a river. At the bottom was a heavy iron door, its surface etched with a single word: Nile. Hastings whistled softly. "You were right, Poirot. This is straight out of Death on the Nile. But how do we open it?" Poirot examined the door, his fingers tracing a small keyhole. "A key, Hastings. The groundskeeper must have had it, or perhaps—" He paused, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing the leather pouch from the boathouse. Inside, nestled among the folds of the parchment, was a small brass key. The key turned smoothly in the lock, and the door swung open with a groan. Beyond was a small chamber, its walls lined with shelves. At the center stood a wooden chest, its lid carved with the initials A.C. Poirot approached it cautiously, his heart quickening. He lifted the lid, revealing a single object, a manuscript, its pages yellowed but intact, bound in faded leather. The title, written in elegant script, read, "The Final Secret." "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered. "It is real. An unpublished work, by Madame Christie herself." Hastings peered over his shoulder, his eyes wide. "Is that what all this is about? A book? Why would someone kill for it?" Poirot's fingers brushed the manuscript's cover, his mind racing. "Because, Hastings, this book holds more than a story. It holds a secret one that someone in this manor is desperate to keep buried. But we are not alone." A faint sound of scuff of boots on stone came from the staircase. Poirot spun around, his flashlight catching a fleeting shadow. "Who is there?" he called, his voice sharp. No answer came, but the air grew heavy with menace. Poirot closed the chest, tucking the manuscript under his arm. "Come, Hastings, we must return to the manor. The killer knows we are close, and they will strike again if we do not act." Back in the drawing room, the guests were in an uproar. The discovery of the vault had shattered their composure, and accusations flew like daggers. Madame Claire pointed a trembling finger at Roland Pierce. "You were in the library this morning, weren't you? Sneaking about, looking for that manuscript." Pierce's eyes flashed. "And you were so busy rehearsing that you didn't notice a murder happening outside your window. Convenient, madame." Miss Ward clutched her assistant's arm, her voice shrill. "This is madness. We're all in danger, and you're bickering like children." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "Enough," he declared. "The manuscript is in my possession, and it will remain so until the killer is unmasked. But I warn you, the one who killed Sir Edmund and Monsieur Harold is among us, and they will not hesitate to kill again." The clue of betrayal was no accident. Someone here has been betrayed, or has betrayed another. And that Mies Amos is the key to this mystery. The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Poirot's eyes moved from face to face, searching for a flicker of guilt. The manuscript, heavy in his hands, seemed to pulse with secrets, its pages a silent witness to the crimes that had unfolded. The chapter closed with a single, chilling thought. The vault had been opened, but the true secret, the identity of the killer, remained locked away, waiting for Poirot's genius to set it free. Chapter 7. The manuscripts cursed the air in Ashbourne Manor was thick with suspicion, the kind that clung to the velvet drapes and seeped into the polished oak floors. Hercule Poirot stood in the center of the vault, his small, immaculate figure dwarfed by the towering shelves that lined the stone walls. The dusty manuscript, the final secret, lay open on a mahogany table, its pages yellowed but intact, the ink of Agatha Christie's own hand unmistakable. The discovery of this unpublished novel, hidden for decades, had sent a ripple of unease through the guests. Each one, Poirot noted, had a flicker of greed or fear in their eyes as they glanced at the manuscript, as though it were both a treasure and a curse. The vault, a cold, cavernous chamber beneath the manor, had been unlocked only hours ago, thanks to the map etched into the boathouse by the late groundskeeper. Poirot's gloved fingers traced the edges of the manuscript, his sharp eyes scanning the cryptic annotations scrawled in the margins. They were not in Christie's hand. Someone else had defiled these pages with their own secrets. The words were fragmented, a jumble of letters and symbols. But Poirot's little gray cells were already at work, piecing together the puzzle. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his voice a soft echo in the vault. "This is no mere novel. It is a confession, a map, a warning. But to whom, and of what?" The guests had gathered at the vault's entrance, their faces a gallery of apprehension. Madame Claire, the retired actress, clutched her shawl tightly, her eyes darting to the manuscript as though it might leap from the table and accuse her. Mr. Harold Finch, the sharp-tongued journalist, stood with his notebook open, scribbling furiously, though Poirot suspected he was more interested in the story's value than its truth. Miss Eliza Thorne, the librarian, hovered near the back, her nervous fingers twisting the hem of her cardigan. And then there was Mr. Percival Gray, the assistant librarian, whose quiet demeanor belied a sharpness Poirot had not yet fully deciphered. "Monsieur Poirot," Madame Claire said, her voice trembling with a theatrical quiver. "This manuscript, it is dangerous, is it not? Sir Edmund's death, the groundskeeper's murder, surely they are connected to this, this thing." Poirot turned, his mustache twitching slightly as he regarded her. "Dangerous, madame, perhaps. But danger lies not in the object, but in the hearts that covet it. Tell me, what do you know of this manuscript?" Her lips parted, then closed, as though the words had caught in her throat. I only know what Sir Edmund told me. He said it was Agatha Christie's greatest work, one she never meant to publish. He claimed it held a secret that could ruin reputations." "Reputations," Poirot repeated, his eyes narrowing. "Whose reputations, I wonder?" Before Madame Claire could respond, a sharp cry echoed from the corridor above. The guests froze, their eyes wide. Poirot, ever calm, adjusted his tie and strode toward the sound, his polished shoes clicking against the stone floor. The others followed, their footsteps a chaotic chorus behind him. In the grand dining hall, a scene of disarray awaited. A crystal goblet lay shattered on the floor, its contents a deep burgundy wine, spreading like blood across the Persian rug. Beside it stood Mrs. Beatrice Langley, the manor's housekeeper, her face pale as she clutched a silver tray. "It was meant for you, Monsieur Poirot," she stammered, pointing to the goblet. "I was bringing it to the vault when I dropped it. I swear, I smelled something strange, bitter, like almonds." Poirot knelt beside the shattered glass, his nostrils flaring as he inhaled. "Cyanure," he said softly. "Poison, a most unsubtle attempt on my life." He rose, his gaze sweeping over the guests. "Someone in this room does not wish for Hercule Poirot to uncover the truth. But I assure you, Mies Amos, I am not so easily dispatched." The room erupted in murmurs. Mr. Finch's pen scratched furiously, while Miss Thorne shrank back, her eyes wide with fear. Mr. Gray, however, remained silent, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. "Monsieur Poirot," Finch said, his voice dripping with skepticism, "are you suggesting one of us tried to poison you? That's a bold accusation." "Not bold, Monsieur Finch. Precise. The poison was in a goblet meant for me, prepared by someone who knew I would be in the vault. Only those present at the discovery of the manuscript could have known this." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And so, the circle tightens. The storm outside raged on, its howls rattling the manor's ancient windows. The guests were trapped, not only by the weather, but by the weight of their own secrets." Poirot gestured for them to return to the drawing room, where a fire crackled in the hearth, casting long shadows across the walls. Mies Amos Poirot began, pacing before the fireplace. "Let us consider the facts. Sir Edmund Ashburn, a man obsessed with Agatha Christie, invites us to this manor to reveal a secret. He is murdered before he can speak. The groundskeeper, who knew of a hidden vault, is also killed. And now, a poison meant for Poirot. All of this revolves around the final secret. But why? What is it about this manuscript that inspires such desperation?" Miss Thorne raised a trembling hand. "It's cursed," she whispered. "Sir Edmund told me once that anyone who touched that manuscript would meet a terrible fate. He said Agatha Christie herself hid it away because it was too dangerous." "Cursed." Poirot's tone was gentle, but his eyes were sharp. "Mademoiselle, I do not believe in curses. I believe in motives, in greed, in fear. Tell me, what did Sir Edmund say about this curse?" Miss Thorne hesitated, her fingers twisting her cardigan again. He said the manuscript revealed something about Agatha Christie's life, something she never wanted known. He wouldn't tell me what, but he was afraid. He said it could destroy her legacy." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "And you, Monsieur Gray, you worked closely with Mademoiselle Thorne. Did Sir Edmund share such fears with you?" Mr. Gray's pale eyes met Poirot's, steady and unyielding. "He mentioned the manuscript once, in passing. He said it was his greatest treasure, but also his greatest burden. I thought he was being dramatic." "Dramatic," Poirot echoed, his voice soft but laced with irony. "Yet 2 men are dead, and a 3rd attempt has been made. Drama, monsieur, has a way of becoming tragedy." The drawing-room door burst open, and a gust of wind swept through, extinguishing the fire. In the sudden darkness, a figure bolted toward the hall. Poirot's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "I hate this. Stop it!" The guests scrambled, and Mr. Finch, with surprising agility, tackled the fleeing figure. It was Mr. Reginald Carver, a minor guest who had remained largely silent, a solicitor with a penchant for rare books. He struggled in Finch's grip, his face flushed with panic. "Monsieur Carver," Poirot said, stepping forward as the fire was relit, "why do you run? What is it you fear?" Carver's eyes darted to the manuscript, now safely in Poirot's hands. I only wanted to leave. This place is cursed. You heard Miss Thorne. I don't want to die." Poirot's mustache twitched. "You will not die, monsieur, unless you give me reason to suspect you. Tell me, what do you know of this manuscript?" Carver swallowed hard, his hands trembling. I was hired by Sir Edmund to appraise it. He said it was worth a fortune, but only if its secret remained hidden. He was going to sell it to a private collector, someone who didn't care about the consequences." "Consequences?" Poirot pressed. "What consequences?" Carver's voice dropped to a whisper. He said it could ruin Agatha Christie's name, that it proved she wasn't who she seemed. The room fell silent, the weight of Carver's words settling over them like a fog. Poirot's eyes gleamed with a new intensity. "Merci, Monsieur Carver. You have given me much to consider." As the guests dispersed to their rooms, Poirot remained in the drawing room, the manuscript in his lap, He opened it to a random page, his fingers tracing the cryptic annotations. They were not random, he realized. They were a code, a cipher, much like the one he had found in Sir Edmund's pen. But this code was different, more complex, and it hinted at something far greater than a literary scandal. The night deepened, and Poirot worked alone, his mind a whirlwind of connections. The manuscript was not just a novel, it was a confession, a hidden truth about Agatha Christie's life, perhaps written in her own hand to protect or to punish. But who would kill to keep it hidden? And why target Poirot? A soft knock at the door startled him. It was Mrs. Langley, the housekeeper, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, I found something in Sir Edmund's study. I thought you should see it." She handed him a small, leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with Sir Edmund's handwriting. Poirot flipped through it, his eyes narrowing as he read a single line. "The Society will stop at nothing to protect her legacy." "The Society," Poirot murmured. "Mon Dieu, what have we stumbled upon?" The notebook detailed Sir Edmund's discovery of a secret society dedicated to guarding Agatha Christie's unpublished works. He had joined them, only to betray their trust by planning to reveal the final secret. The annotations in the manuscript, Poirot realized, were not Christie's, but the Society's warnings to those who dared to expose the truth. As dawn approached, Poirot closed the notebook, his mind made up. The killer was among them, a member of this society, driven by loyalty or fear. The poisoned goblet was a desperate act, a sign that the killer was growing reckless. Poirot would need to act quickly, before another life was claimed. He rose, the manuscript tucked under his arm, and made his way to the dining hall. The guests would gather at breakfast, unaware that Poirot was closing in. The cipher in the manuscript, the Society's secrets, the death soul, were pieces of a puzzle that only Hercule Poirot could solve. And solve it he would, before the curse of the final secret claimed another victim. Chapter 8. A Game of Motives. The rain-battered Ashburn Manor, its relentless drumming against the tall, arched windows a fitting accompaniment to the tension that coiled within the grand dining hall. Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the long, mahogany table, his small, immaculate figure a stark contrast to the opulent chaos of the room. Crystal chandeliers gleamed faintly in the flickering candlelight, casting shadows that danced across the faces of the assembled guests. The air was thick with suspicion, each pair of eyes darting to the next, as though the killer might betray themselves with a glance. Poirot's mustache twitched slightly, a telltale sign of his mind at work, his little gray cells sifting through the tangle of lies and half-truths. The discovery of the poisoned glass of wine meant for him had sharpened his resolve. The killer was growing bolder, more desperate, and Poirot knew that this evening's gathering would be pivotal. He had summoned the guests, those who remained after the grim discoveries of Sir Edmund's body, the groundskeeper's murder, and the chilling implications of the unpublished manuscript, to lay bare their motives. The game was afoot, and Poirot was its master. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot began, his voice precise and measured, carrying the weight of authority despite its soft cadence. "We are, all of us, entangled in a web of deceit. The deaths of Sir Edmund Ashburn and poor Mr. Grayson, the groundskeeper, are not mere accidents of fate. Nan, they are the work of a calculating mind, one that seeks to protect a secret so profound it has driven them to murder. Tonight, we shall uncover the motives that bind us to this tragedy." The guests shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Madame Claire, the retired actress, sat with her chin tilted defiantly, though her fingers trembled as they clutched her pearl necklace. Beside her, Mr. Harold Vance, the sharp-tongued journalist, scribbled furiously in a small notebook, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. Miss Eleanor Price, the nervous librarian, twisted a handkerchief in her lap, her pale face half hidden by her spectacles. Dr. Julian Carver, a retired physician with a penchant for rare books, adjusted his cufflinks with deliberate calm, while Mrs. Beatrice Langley, a wealthy widow with a penchant for gossip, fanned herself with a lace handkerchief, her gaze flitting between Poirot and the others. Lastly, Mr. Thomas Ridley, a quiet antiques dealer, sat with his hands folded, his expression unreadable, but his eyes sharp with calculation. Poirot's gaze swept over them, noting every detail, the way Madame Claire's necklace gleamed with a faint scratch, the ink smudge on Vance's thumb, the faint tremor in Miss Price's hands. Each of you, he continued, has a connection to Sir Edmund, to this manor, and, I suspect, to the manuscript that lies at the heart of this mystery. Let us begin with you, Mr. Vance. The journalist looked up sharply, his pen pausing. Me? I'm just here to write a story, Poirot. Sir Edmund was a big name in literary circles. His death is news, nothing more. Raiment. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Yet I have learned that you were investigating Sir Edmund's financial dealings. Nan, you were seen arguing with him at the London Literary Club only last week. Perhaps you uncovered something compromising. Vance's jaw tightened, but he leaned back with a forced laugh. You're fishing, Poirot. Yes, I was looking into Sir Edmund's finances. The man was drowning in debt, you know. Ashbourne Manor's upkeep isn't cheap, and his obsession with rare manuscripts bled him dry. But that's no motive for murder, it's just good journalism. Poirot tilted his head, his expression unreadable. And yet, your articles have a certain venom, Mr. Vance. You wrote of Sir Edmund's reckless ambition and his dangerous obsession with Agatha Christie's legacy. Did you, perhaps, discover something about this manuscript that threatened your own ambitions? A scoop, as you journalists say, that Sir Edmund refused to share. Vance's face reddened, but before he could retort, Madame Claire interjected, her voice rich with theatrical flair. Oh, please, Mr. Poirot, let us not waste time on Mr. Vance's petty grudges. If anyone had a motive, it's that librarian, Miss Price. She's been skulking about, clutching her secrets like a miser with gold. Miss Price gasped, her handkerchief falling to the table. That's outrageous. I only came because Sir Edmund invited me. I worked for Christie's publisher years ago. Yes, but I've done nothing wrong. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the brewing argument. Mademoiselle Price, you have spoken of rumors regarding a missing Christie novel. Tell me, what did you know of Sir Edmund's plans for this manuscript? Did he confide in you? Miss Price's eyes darted nervously. He mentioned something about a discovery, a manuscript that could change everything. But he was vague, always vague. I thought it was just his usual boasting. Boasting, or a threat, Poirot pressed gently. For if this manuscript, the final secret, is indeed authentic, its publication would shake the literary world, and you, with your connections to the publishing house, would know its value. Nay, Miss Price shook her head vehemently, but Poirot's attention shifted to Dr. Carver, who had been watching the exchange with a faint smile. And you, Doctor, what is your interest in this affair? You are a collector of rare books, are you? Not a manuscript by Agatha Christie would be a prize worth almost any price. Dr. Carver's smile faded slightly. I collect for the love of literature, Monsieur Poirot, not for profit. Sir Edmund and I shared a passion for Christie's work. He invited me to verify the manuscript's authenticity, nothing more. Verify, or perhaps acquire. Poirot's tone was light, but his eyes were piercing. For a collector, the temptation to possess such a treasure could be overwhelming, could it not? Mrs. Langley let out a dramatic sigh, her fan fluttering. Really, Monsieur Poirot, must we all be suspects? I came here for a pleasant weekend, not to be interrogated like a common criminal. I barely knew Sir Edmund, and yet, Poirot said, turning to her, you were heard discussing Sir Edmund's financial troubles with Mr. Vance in the drawing room last night. You spoke of a literary scandal that could ruin reputations. What did you mean, madame? Mrs. Langley's fan froze mid-flutter. I only meant that Sir Edmund's debts were an open secret in society. People talk, you know. Indeed, they do, Poirot said, his voice soft but unyielding. And sometimes, what they say reveals more than they intend. The room fell silent, the only sound the patter of rain and the crackle of the fire in the hearth. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his mind a whirlwind of connections. The manuscript, The final secret was the key, but its significance went beyond its literary value. Sir Edmund's journal had hinted at a deeper scandal, one tied to Agatha Christie's estate and a web of greed and betrayal. The poisoned wine suggested the killer was growing desperate, and Poirot knew he must act swiftly to prevent another death. He stopped pacing and faced the guests. "Let us consider the facts. Sir Edmund was murdered to silence his plan to reveal the manuscript. Mr. Grayson, the groundskeeper, was killed because he knew of the hidden vault. And now, a glass of wine, meant for Hercule Poirot, was poisoned. The killer is among us, and their motive is tied to this manuscript. But what is it they fear? The loss of wealth, the exposure of a secret, or perhaps the ruin of a legacy?" Poirot's gaze settled on Mr. Ridley, the antiques dealer, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. "Monsieur Ridley, you have said little, yet I observe that you are a man who listens carefully. You deal in rare objects, do you not? Manuscripts, perhaps?" Ridley's eyes met, Poirot's steady and unblinking. "I deal in many things, Monsieur Poirot, but I assure you, I have no interest in murder." "Perhaps not," Poirot said, "but you were seen examining the library shelves late last night, after the first edition Christie book vanished, and I have found this." He produced a small, leather-bound ledger from his pocket, its pages filled with meticulous notes. "This was hidden in your room, Monsieur Ridley. It details transactions involving rare manuscripts, some of which bear Sir Edmund's name. Care to explain?" The room erupted in gasps. Ridley's calm facade cracked, his hands clenching on the table. "That ledger is private. I was helping Sir Edmund authenticate some documents, that's all. He was in debt, yes, but I was his friend, not his enemy. Friendship," Poirot mused, "is a curious thing. It can mask many motives: greed, envy, betrayal. Tell me, Monsieur Ridley, did Sir Edmund promise you a share of the manuscript's profits? Or did he threaten to expose your dealings in forged literary artifacts?" Ridley's face paled, but he said nothing. The other guests exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of Poirot's words sinking in. The ledger, discovered by Poirot during a discreet search of Ridley's room, was a damning piece of evidence. It listed transactions involving manuscripts of questionable origin, some linked to Sir Edmund's collection. If Ridley was involved in a forgery scheme, the discovery of an authentic Christie manuscript could have exposed him, ruining his reputation and livelihood. Poirot turned to the group, his voice rising slightly. "The manuscript, Mies Amos, is not merely a literary treasure. It is a weapon, one that threatens someone in this room. Sir Edmund's death was no accident, nor was Grayson's, and the poison meant for me proves that the killer will stop at nothing to protect their secret. But Hercule Poirot does not falter. I shall uncover the truth, and the guilty shall face justice." The firelight flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Madame Claire's necklace glinted, Vance's pen scratched, and Miss Price's handkerchief lay crumpled on the table. Each guest was a piece in the puzzle, their motives interwoven with the manuscript's mystery. Poirot knew the killer was watching, waiting for his next move, and he was ready as the clock struck 9. A loud crash echoed from the hallway, startling the guests. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Stay here," he commanded, striding toward the door. The others hesitated, then followed, their curiosity outweighing their fear. In the hallway, a large vase lay shattered on the floor, its fragments scattered across the polished wood. Beside it was a small, folded note, written in a hurried scrawl. "Leave the manuscript alone, or you will be next." Poirot picked up the note, his expression unreadable. "The killer grows careless," he murmured, "and in their carelessness, they shall be caught." He turned to the guests, who stood huddled behind him, their faces pale. "Return to the dining hall. We shall continue our discussion. And mark my words, Mies Amos, before this night is over, we shall know who among us is the murderer." The guests filed back into the room, their whispers filling the air like the rustle of leaves. Poirot remained in the hallway for a moment, studying the note. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the ink matched a pen found in Sir Edmund's hand. Another clue, another thread in the tapestry of deceit. Back in the dining hall, Poirot resumed his interrogation, focusing on Madame Claire. "Madame, you spoke of a scandal involving Sir Edmund and a stolen manuscript. Tell me more. What did you know of his plans?" Madame Claire hesitated, her fingers tightening on her necklace. "It was years ago, Monsieur Poirot. Sir Edmund was ambitious. He believed he had found something extraordinary, a story Christie never published. He said it would make him famous, but there were people in the literary world who didn't want it revealed. Others," Poirot pressed. "Who were these people?" "I don't know their names," she said quickly. He only hinted at a group, a society of sorts, that guarded Christie's secrets. He said they were powerful, dangerous even. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The secret society, again a thread that had surfaced in Sir Edmund's journal and now in Madame Claire's story. Was it real, or a fabrication to deflect suspicion? He made a mental note to revisit the journal later. Turning to Dr. Carver, Poirot asked, "And you, Doctor, did Sir Edmund ever mention this society to you?" Carver shook his head. He spoke only of the manuscript's authenticity. He was convinced it was genuine, but he needed my expertise to confirm it. "I saw no evidence of a society, only his obsession." Poirot nodded, filing away the response. Each guest's story added a layer to the mystery, but none were entirely truthful. The ledger, the note, the poisoned wine all pointed to a killer, desperate to protect their secret. But what was it? A financial scam, as Vance suggested, a literary forgery, as Ridley's ledger implied, or something deeper, tied to Agatha Christie's legacy. As the evening wore on, Poirot orchestrated the conversation like a conductor, drawing out contradictions and half-truths. Mrs. Langley admitted to overhearing Sir Edmund discuss a large sum of money with an unknown caller. Miss Price confessed to hiding a letter from Sir Edmund, fearing it implicated her in his plans. And Ridley, under pressure, admitted to handling questionable manuscripts but swore he had no part in the murders. The clock ticked closer to midnight, and the storm outside showed no sign of abating. Poirot stood once more, his presence commanding the room. Miss, we have uncovered much tonight, but the truth remains elusive. The killer is clever, but they cannot hide forever. Tomorrow, we shall explore the manor further, for I believe the answers lie within its walls. But for now, I urge you to remain vigilant. The murderer is among us, and they will strike again if we do not act. As the guests dispersed, their faces a mixture of fear and suspicion. Poirot lingered by the fire, his mind racing. The ledger was a significant find, but it was not enough. The note in the hallway suggested the killer was watching his every move, and the poisoned wine was a personal challenge. Poirot smiled faintly. He thrived on such challenges. Slipping the ledger into his pocket, he made his way to the library, where the first edition Christie book had vanished. The shelves loomed in the dim light, their secrets waiting to be uncovered. Poirot ran his fingers along the spines, pausing at a gap where the stolen book had been. Something caught his eye, a faint scratch on the wood, barely visible. He pressed it, and a soft click echoed in the silence. A panel slid open, revealing a small compartment. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed with age. It bore Agatha Christie's signature and a single line. "The truth is buried where the roses bloom." Poirot's heart quickened. The rose on the study door, the note in Sir Edmund's hand, and now this. The clues were aligning, pointing to a truth that had been hidden for decades. He tucked the paper into his pocket, his resolve hardened. The killer had made a mistake, and Poirot would ensure it was their last dot as he returned to his room. The manor creaked around him, its shadows whispering of secrets yet to be unveiled. The game of motives was far from over, but Hercule Poirot was one step closer to victory. Chapter 9. The locked room. Riddled the rain lashed against the tall windows of Ashburn Manor, each gust rattling the ancient panes as if the storm itself were an impatient guest demanding entry. Inside, the air was thick with suspicion, the kind that clung to the skin like damp wool. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand library, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rug. his eyes tracing the ornate bookshelves that loomed like sentinels over the room. The guests, a dwindling assembly of nervous souls, huddled near the fireplace, their faces flickering in the amber glow. The discovery of the poisoned wineglass, meant for Poirot himself, had left them shaken, their trust in one another frayed to threads. The little Belgian detective adjusted his bow tie, his mustache twitching as his mind churned. The manuscript, the final secret, lay locked in a safe behind a portrait of Sir Edmund Ashburn, its secrets pulsing like a heartbeat in the manor's walls. To murder Sir Edmund and the groundskeeper had already stained the weekend, and now, as the storm howled, a new terror was about to unfold. "Mies Amos," Poirot began, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a scalpel. "We are not merely guests in this manor. We are players in a game most deadly. The killer, he is cunning, yes, but he is not infallible. And tonight, we shall uncover another piece of this puzzle." The retired actress, Madame Claire, clutched her shawl, her eyes darting to the journalist, Mr. Roland Vance, who leaned against a bookshelf with a smirk that barely masked his unease. The librarian, Miss Evelyn Harper, sat rigid, her fingers twisting a handkerchief, while her assistant, Mr. Timothy Wells, hovered nearby, his pale face a study in nervous deference. The other guests, a retired colonel, a reclusive scholar, and a young heiress, shifted uncomfortably, their secrets piling up like shadows in the candlelight dot. Before Poirot could continue, a scream tore through the manor, sharp and jagged, slicing the tension in the room. It came from upstairs, a sound so raw it seemed to pull the air from their lungs. Poirot's head snapped toward the door, his eyes narrowing. "Vite, we must go," he commanded, already striding toward the staircase, his small frame below, the authority in his step. The guests followed, a reluctant procession, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous hall. The scream had come from Miss Harper's bedroom, a modest chamber on the second floor, its door ajar. Poirot pushed it open, his hand steady despite the dread that hung in the air. The sight within stopped them all. Cold Miss Evelyn Harper lay, sprawled across the floor, her body twisted unnaturally, her eyes wide with a frozen horror. A copy of And Then There Were None rested beside her, its pages splayed open as if she'd been reading it in her final moments. A single candlestick, its flame extinguished, lay toppled near her hand. The room was locked from the inside, the key still in the door, and the windows were bolted shut, their latches rusted with age. The storm raged outside, but no rain had breached the room. It was a perfect locked room mystery, the kind that would delight Agatha Christie herself. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered, his voice barely audible over the thunder. He knelt beside the body, his gloved hands hovering over Miss Harper's form, careful not to disturb the scene. Her neck bore faint bruises, suggesting strangulation, but the absence of any weapon or sign of struggle puzzled him. "This is no accident," he said, his tone clipped. "This is murder, most deliberate." Madame Claire stifled a sob, clinging to the colonel, who muttered something about damned cowardice. Roland Vance, the journalist, pushed forward, his notepad already in hand. "How the devil did the killer get in and out?" he demanded, his voice sharp with a mix of fear and fascination. "The door was locked, the window sealed. It's impossible." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Impossible? Non, monsieur. The impossible is merely the possible that has not yet been understood. The little gray cells, they are already at work." He rose, his gaze sweeping the room. The bed was neatly made, its coverlet undisturbed. A small writing desk held a few papers, a fountain pen, and a half-burned candle. A wardrobe stood in the corner, its door slightly ajar. The air carried a faint scent of lavender, mingling with something sharper, something metallic. Poirot's nose twitched, and he moved toward the window, examining the bolts with a magnifying glass he produced from his pocket. "Regardless," he said, pointing to a faint scratch on the window frame. "This is not the work of time or weather. This is recent, deliberate. The window, it has been tampered with, but it's bolted." The heiress, Miss Lydia Compton, protested, her voice trembling. "How could anyone open it without breaking the glass?" Poirot smiled faintly, a cat-like expression. That, mademoiselle, is the riddle we must solve. But first, we must secure the scene. Colonel, please guard the door. No one enters or leaves until I say." The colonel, a gruff man with a military bearing, nodded and took his post, his eyes scanning the group with suspicion. Poirot turned his attention to the book beside Miss Harper's body. He lifted it carefully, noting the page it was open to, the chapter where another victim in "And Then There Were None" meets their end. A folded piece of paper was tucked inside, its edges worn. Poirot unfolded it, revealing a handwritten note in an elegant script. "The society guards its secrets. Speak, and you perish." He held the note up, letting the guests see it. Gasps rippled through the group. "The secret society," Madame Claire whispered, her hand flying to her locket. "It's real." "Then, oui, madame," Poirot said gravely, "and it seems Miss Harper spoke too much." He moved to the wardrobe, opening it fully. Inside hung Miss Harper's modest dresses, but something caught his eye, a faint glint at the back. He reached in, his fingers brushing against a hidden panel. With a gentle push, it clicked open, revealing a narrow space just wide enough for a person to slip through. A draft wafted from within, carrying the scent of dust and old wood. "A concealed passage," Poirot announced, stepping back. "This is how the killer entered and exited, leaving the door locked. But the window is the key to the deception." He returned to the window, his magnifying glass tracing the scratch marks. "The bolts are old, yes, but they have been manipulated. See here," he pointed to a thin wire, barely visible, threaded through a tiny hole in the frame. "The killer used this to pull the bolt back into place from the outside, creating the illusion of a locked room." The guests stared, dumbfounded. Roland Vance scribbled furiously, muttering, "Brilliant, diabolical, but who?" Miss Compton demanded. "Who would do this?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Someone who knew Miss Harper's habits. Someone who knew she would be alone tonight. And someone with knowledge of this manor's secrets." He turned to Timothy Wells, the librarian's assistant, who had been silent, his face pale as chalk. "Monsieur Wells, you were close to Miss Harper. Did she confide anything to you about the manuscript or the society?" Wells flinched, his hands trembling. "No, Monsieur Poirot. She was secretive. She only told me she was researching something important, something about Mrs. Christie." Poirot's gaze lingered on him, unyielding. "And yet, you were seen near her room earlier this evening, n'est-ce pas, by the maid, who mentioned your presence to me." The group turned to Wells, their eyes sharp with accusation. He stammered, I was just checking on her. She seemed upset after dinner." Ridley's face paled, but he said nothing. The other guests exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of Poirot's words sinking in. The ledger, discovered by Poirot during a discreet search of Ridley's room, was a damning piece of evidence. It listed transactions involving manuscripts of questionable origin, some linked to Sir Edmund's collection. If Ridley was involved in a forgery scheme, the discovery of an authentic Christie manuscript could have exposed him, ruining his reputation and livelihood. Poirot turned to the group, his voice rising slightly. "The manuscript, Mies Amos, is not merely a literary treasure. It is a weapon, one that threatens someone in this room. Sir Edmund's death was no accident, nor was Grayson's, and the poison meant for me proves that the killer will stop at nothing to protect their secret. But Hercule Poirot does not falter. I shall uncover the truth, and the guilty shall face justice." The firelight flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Madame Claire's necklace glinted, Vance's pen scratched, and Miss Price's handkerchief lay crumpled on the table. Each guest was a piece in the puzzle, their motives interwoven with the manuscript's mystery. Poirot knew the killer was watching, waiting for his next move, and he was ready as the clock struck 9. A loud crash echoed from the hallway, startling the guests. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Stay here," he commanded, striding toward the door. The others hesitated, then followed, their curiosity outweighing their fear. In the hallway, a large vase lay shattered on the floor, its fragments scattered across the polished wood. Beside it was a small, folded note, written in a hurried scrawl. Leave the manuscript alone, or you will be next. Poirot picked up the note, his expression unreadable. The killer grows careless, he murmured, and in their carelessness, they shall be caught. He turned to the guests, who stood huddled behind him, their faces pale. Return to the dining hall. We shall continue our discussion. And mark my words, Mies, Amos, before this night is over, we shall know who among us is the murderer. The guests filed back into the room, their whispers filling the air like the rustle of leaves. Poirot remained in the hallway for a moment, studying the note. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the ink matched a pen found in Sir Edmund's hand. Another clue, another thread in the tapestry of deceit. Back in the dining hall, Poirot resumed his interrogation, focusing on Madame Claire. Madame, you spoke of a scandal involving Sir Edmund and a stolen manuscript. Tell me more. What did you know of his plans? Madame Claire hesitated, her fingers tightening on her necklace. It was years ago, Monsieur Poirot. Sir Edmund was ambitious. He believed he had found something extraordinary, a story Christie never published. He said it would make him famous, but there were people in the literary world who didn't want it revealed. Others, Poirot pressed. Who were these people? I don't know their names, she said quickly. He only hinted at a group, a society of sorts, that guarded Christie's secrets. He said they were powerful, dangerous even. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The secret society, again a thread that had surfaced in Sir Edmund's journal and now in Madame Claire's story. Was it real, or a fabrication to deflect suspicion? He made a mental note to revisit the journal later. Turning to Dr. Carver, Poirot asked, "And you, Doctor, did Sir Edmund ever mention this society to you?" Carver shook his head. He spoke only of the manuscript's authenticity. He was convinced it was genuine, but he needed my expertise to confirm it. I saw no evidence of a society, only his obsession. Poirot nodded, filing away the response. Each guest's story added a layer to the mystery, but none were entirely truthful. The ledger, the note, the poisoned wine all pointed to a killer, desperate to protect their secret. But what was it? A financial scam, as Vance suggested, a literary forgery, as Ridley's ledger implied, or something deeper, tied to Agatha Christie's legacy. As the evening wore on, Poirot orchestrated the conversation like a conductor, drawing out contradictions and half-truths. Mrs. Langley admitted to overhearing Sir Edmund discuss a large sum of money with an unknown caller. Miss Price confessed to hiding a letter from Sir Edmund, fearing it implicated her in his plans. And Ridley, under pressure, admitted to handling questionable manuscripts but swore he had no part in the murders. The clock ticked closer to midnight, and the storm outside showed no sign of abating. Poirot stood once more, his presence commanding the room. Miss, we have uncovered much tonight, but the truth remains elusive. The killer is clever, but they cannot hide forever. Tomorrow, we shall explore the manor further, for I believe the answers lie within its walls. But for now, I urge you to remain vigilant. The murderer is among us, and they will strike again if we do not act. As the guests dispersed, their faces a mixture of fear and suspicion. Poirot lingered by the fire, his mind racing. The ledger was a significant find, but it was not enough. The note in the hallway suggested the killer was watching his every move, and the poisoned wine was a personal challenge. Poirot smiled faintly. He thrived on such challenges. Slipping the ledger into his pocket, he made his way to the library, where the first edition Christie book had vanished. The shelves loomed in the dim light, their secrets waiting to be uncovered. Poirot ran his fingers along the spines, pausing at a gap where the stolen book had been. Something caught his eye, a faint scratch on the wood, barely visible. He pressed it, and a soft click echoed in the silence. A panel slid open, revealing a small compartment. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed with age. It bore Agatha Christie's signature and a single line. "The truth is buried where the roses bloom." Poirot's heart quickened. The rose on the study door, the note in Sir Edmund's hand, and now this. The clues were aligning, pointing to a truth that had been hidden for decades. He tucked the paper into his pocket, his resolve hardened. The killer had made a mistake. and Poirot would ensure it was their last dot as he returned to his room. The manor creaked around him, its shadows whispering of secrets yet to be unveiled. The game of motives was far from over, but Hercule Poirot was one step closer to victory. Chapter 9. The locked room riddled the rain, lashed against the tall windows of Ashburn Manor, each gust rattling the ancient panes, as if the storm itself were an impatient guest demanding entry. Inside, the air was thick with suspicion, the kind that clung to the skin like damp wool. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand library, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rug, his eyes tracing the ornate bookshelves that loomed like sentinels over the room. The guests, a dwindling assembly of nervous souls, huddled near the fireplace, their faces flickering in the amber glow. The discovery of the poisoned wineglass, meant for Poirot himself, had left them shaken, their trust in one another frayed. Two threads. The little Belgian detective adjusted his bow tie, his mustache twitching as his mind churned. The manuscript, the final secret, lay locked in a safe behind a portrait of Sir Edmund Ashburn, its secrets pulsing like a heartbeat in the manor's walls. To murder Sir Edmund and the groundskeeper had already stained the weekend, and now, as the storm howled, a new terror was about to unfold. Mesmerizing, Poirot began, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a scalpel. We are not merely guests in this manor. We are players in a game most deadly. The killer, he is cunning, yes, but he is not infallible. And tonight, we shall uncover another piece of this puzzle. The retired actress, Madame Claire, clutched her shawl, her eyes darting to the journalist, Mr. Roland Vance, who leaned against a bookshelf with a smirk that barely masked his unease. The librarian, Miss Evelyn Harper, sat rigid, her fingers twisting a handkerchief, while her assistant, Mr. Timothy Wells, hovered nearby, his pale face a study in nervous deference. The other guests, a retired colonel, a reclusive scholar, and a young heiress, shifted uncomfortably, their secrets piling up like shadows in the candlelight dot before Poirot could continue. A scream tore through the manor, sharp and jagged, slicing the tension in the room. It came from upstairs, a sound so raw it seemed to pull the air from their lungs. Poirot's head snapped toward the door, his eyes narrowing. "Vite, we must go," he commanded, already striding toward the staircase, his small frame belying the authority in his step. The guests followed, a reluctant procession, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous hall. The scream had come from Miss Harper's bedroom, a modest chamber on the second floor. Its door ajar. Poirot pushed it open, his hand steady despite the dread that hung in the air. The sight within stopped them all. Cold. Miss Evelyn Harper lay, sprawled across the floor, her body twisted unnaturally, her eyes wide with a frozen horror. A copy of And Then There Were None rested beside her, its pages splayed open as if she'd been reading it in her final moments. A single candlestick, its flame extinguished, lay toppled near her hand. The room was locked from the inside, the key still in the door, and the windows were bolted shut, their latches rusted with age. The storm raged outside, but no rain had breached the room. It was a perfect locked room mystery, the kind that would delight Agatha Christie herself. "Mon dear Poirot," whispered, his voice barely audible over the thunder. He knelt beside the body, his gloved hands hovering over Miss Harper's form, careful not to disturb the scene. Her neck bore faint bruises, suggesting strangulation, but the absence of any weapon or sign of struggle puzzled him. "This is no accident," he said, his tone clipped. "This is murder, most deliberate." Madame Claire stifled a sob, clinging to the colonel, who muttered something about damned cowardice. Roland Vance, the journalist, pushed forward, his notepad already in hand. "How the devil did the killer get in and out?" he demanded, his voice sharp with a mix of fear and fascination. "The door was locked, the windows sealed. It's impossible." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Impossible. Nan, monsieur. The impossible is merely the possible that has not yet been understood. The little gray cells, they are already at work." He rose, his gaze sweeping the room. The bed was neatly made, its coverlet undisturbed. A small writing desk held a few papers, a fountain pen, and a half-burned candle. A wardrobe stood in the corner, its door slightly ajar. The air carried a faint scent of lavender, mingling with something sharper, something metallic. Poirot's nose twitched, and he moved toward the window, examining the bolts with a magnifying glass he produced from his pocket. "Regard us," he said, pointing to a faint scratch on the window frame. "This is not the work of time or weather. This is recent, deliberate. The window, it has been tampered with, but it's bolted." The heiress, Miss Lydia Compton, protested, her voice trembling. "How could anyone open it without breaking the glass?" Poirot smiled faintly, a cat-like expression. "That, mademoiselle, is the riddle we must solve. But first, we must secure the scene. Colonel, please guard the door. No one enters or leaves until I say." The colonel, a gruff man with a military bearing, nodded and took his post, his eyes scanning the group with suspicion. Poirot turned his attention to the book beside Miss Harper's body. He lifted it carefully, noting the page it was open to. The chapter where another victim in and then there were none meets their end. A folded piece of paper was tucked inside, its edges worn. Poirot unfolded it, revealing a handwritten note in an elegant script. "The society guards its secrets. Speak, and you perish." He held the note up, letting the guests see it. Gasps rippled through the group. "The secret society," Madame Claire whispered, her hand flying to her locket. "It's real, then." "Oui, madame," Poirot said gravely. "And it seems Miss Harper spoke too much." He moved to the wardrobe, opening it fully. Inside hung Miss Harper's modest dresses, but something caught his eye, a faint glint at the back. He reached in, his fingers brushing against a hidden panel. With a gentle push, it clicked open, revealing a narrow space just wide enough for a person to slip through. A draft wafted from within, carrying the scent of dust and old wood. "A concealed passage," Poirot announced, stepping back. "This is how the killer entered and exited, leaving the door locked. But the window is the key to the deception." He returned to the window, his magnifying glass tracing the scratch marks. "The bolts are old, yes, but they have been manipulated. See here," he pointed to a thin wire, barely visible, threaded through a tiny hole in the frame. "The killer used this to pull the bolt back into place from the outside, creating the illusion of a locked room." The guests stared, dumbfounded. Roland Vance scribbled furiously, muttering, "Brilliant, diabolical." "But who?" Miss Compton demanded. "Who would do this?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Someone who knew Miss Harper's habits. Someone who knew she would be alone tonight. And someone with knowledge of this manor's secrets." He turned to Timothy Wells, the librarian's assistant, who had been silent, his face pale as chalk. "Monsieur Wells, you were close to Miss Harper. Did she confide anything to you about the manuscript or the society?" Wells flinched, his hands trembling. "No, Monsieur Poirot. She was secretive. She only told me she was researching something important, something about Mrs. Christie." Poirot's gaze lingered on him, unyielding. "And yet, you were seen near her room earlier this evening, NESCEPA, by the maid, who mentioned your presence to me." The group turned to Wells, their eyes sharp with accusation. He stammered, I was just checking on her. She seemed upset after dinner." "Upset," Poirot repeated, his tone soft but piercing. "And what, pray, upset her so?" Before Wells could answer, Madame Claire stepped forward, her voice quivering. "Monsieur Poirot, I must speak. Evelyn Miss Harper told me something, in confidence yesterday. She said she'd found a letter in the library, hidden in a book. It was from Agatha Christie, addressed to Sir Edmund's father. It mentioned a secret society that protected her unpublished works, and it named someone in this house as a member." The room erupted in whispers. Poirot raised a hand for silence. "Madame, this is most grave. Do you know the name?" She hesitated, her eyes flickering to the others. "She didn't say. She was afraid. She said the letter was dangerous, that it could ruin lives." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "Then, we must find this letter. It is the key to unlocking the killer's motive." He organized a search, dividing the guests into pairs to comb Miss Harper's room and the library. Poirot himself examined the writing desk, sifting through papers. Most were mundane notes on rare books, catalog entries, but one caught his eye, a receipt for a bookbinder in London, dated only a week prior. It listed a commission for restoring a private manuscript. Poirot tucked it into his pocket, his mind turning over the implications as the search continued. Roland Vance approached Poirot, his voice low. "Look, Poirot, I've been digging into Sir Edmund's finances. The man was bleeding money, funneling it into some shadowy trust. I think it's tied to this society. If Miss Harper found out, it could explain why she was targeted." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Monsieur Vance, your instincts are sharp, but your methods are reckless. You must share such findings with me, not pursue them alone. The killer, he does not take kindly to investigators." Vance shrugged, undeterred. "Just doing my job." The search yielded little until Miss Compton, paired with the scholar, let out a cry from the wardrobe. "Monsieur Poirot, here." She held up a small, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed. It was behind the panel. Poirot took it, flipping through the entries. They were in Miss Harper's handwriting, detailing her discovery of the secret passage and her suspicions about the manuscript. One entry stood out. "The letter is hidden in the library, in a hollowed-out book. I fear for my life. The society knows I've seen it." Without hesitation, Poirot led the group to the library. The storm had intensified, lightning illuminating the shelves in stark flashes. He scanned the rows, his fingers trailing over spines until he paused at a worn copy of Murder on the Orient Express. He pulled it down, revealing a hollow compartment inside. Within was a single letter, its wax seal broken, addressed in Agatha Christie's unmistakable hand. Poirot read it aloud, his voice steady despite the weight of the words. "My dear author, I entrust you with the safeguarding of my final work. The society must protect it at all costs. Beware the one who seeks to betray us, for their name is known to you. Keep it hidden, or all we have built will crumble." The signature was unmistakable. Agatha Christie. The guests were silent, the gravity of the discovery sinking in. Poirot folded the letter, his expression grim. "This letter confirms the existence of the society, and it points to a traitor among them. Miss Harper was killed because she found it, but the name of the traitorate is not here. We must look deeper." He turned to the group, his eyes like twin beacons. "The killer believes they have outwitted Hercule Poirot, but they are mistaken. Tomorrow, we shall uncover the final clues. For now, no one leaves the manor. The riddle of the locked room is solved, but the riddle of the murderer remains." As the guests dispersed, their faces etched with fear, Poirot lingered in the library, the letter in his hand. The storm roared outside, but within his mind, the pieces of the puzzle were aligning. The secret society, the manuscript, the murders, all were threads in a tapestry woven by a mastermind. And Poirot, with his little gray cells, was determined to unravel it. The chapter closed with a final, chilling thought. The killer was watching, waiting for their next move, and Poirot, ever the hunter, was ready to meet them. Chapter 11. The attic's revelation. The air in Ashburn Manor had grown thick with suspicion, each creak of the ancient floorboards amplifying the unease that bound the remaining guests like a tightening noose. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the drawing room, his polished shoes reflecting the flicker of the chandelier above, his green eyes scanning the faces before him. The events of the past, Dazer, Edmund's murder, the groundskeeper's death, the librarian's demise in a locked room, had woven a tapestry of intrigue. And now, with the discovery of a secret society tied to Agatha Christie's legacy, the threads were converging toward a singular truth. The latest clue, a coded message in Christie's own hand, had pointed to the manor's attic, a place whispered about by the staff as a repository of forgotten relics. Poirot, ever methodical, knew that the attic held the key to unraveling the mystery and perhaps to catching a killer. Before they struck again, the morning light filtered weakly through the manor's tall windows, casting long shadows across the gathered guests. Madame Claire Duval, the retired actress, whose regal composure was fraying at the edges. Miss Evelyn Warwick, the journalist, her pen poised like a dagger. Dr. Rupert Hargrove, the historian, his tweed jacket rumpled from sleepless nights. Mrs. Beatrice Langston, the widow, her black lace veil a mask for her sharp gaze. Mr. Julian Marsh, the artist, sketching nervously in a corner. And Miss Penelope Gray, the botanist, whose quiet demeanor hid a keen intellect. The librarian's assistant, Mr. Thomas Wren, stood apart, his boyish face pale, his hands fidgeting. With a pocket watch, Poirot had noted his odd behavior a glance too long. A step too hesitant hand suspected he was more than the meek assistant he claimed to be. Monsieur Poirot, Madame Duval said, her voice trembling with a theatrical lilt, this attic business is madness. We're trapped in this wretched house with a murderer, and you propose we climb into some dusty loft. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile beneath it. Madame, it is in the dust of the past that truths are often found. The message, we discovered a note in the hand of Madame Christie herself, directs us to the attic. I, Hercule Poirot, do not ignore such a clue. Will you accompany me, or do you prefer to remain here, wondering what secrets lie above? The group murmured, their reluctance palpable, but curiosity and fear drove them to follow. Mr. Harrow, the butler, led the way, his lantern casting a golden glow up the narrow staircase to the attic door. The lock was rusted, but a heavy key from Harrow's ring turned with a groan, revealing a steep wooden stair that vanished into darkness. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of aged wood and forgotten paper. Poirot ascended first, his cane tapping each step, his senses alert. The attic was a cavern of shadows, its sloping ceiling crisscrossed with beams. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light piercing the single dormer window. Trunks and crates littered the floor, alongside shelves sagging under the weight of books, paintings, and peculiar artifacts. Cracked violin, a tarnished silver mirror, a porcelain doll with one eye missing. The guests spread out, their footsteps muffled by years of neglect, their breaths visible in the chill. Poirot's attention was drawn to a large trunk in the corner, its brass fittings gleaming faintly. Its lid was carved with the now Quillandreau's symbol, a motif that had haunted the case since the first letter arrived at his London apartment. This, he said, his voice cutting through the silence, is no ordinary trunk. Observe the craftsmanship, the symbol. It is, I believe, the heart of our mystery. Dr. Hargrove, ever the historian, approached, his fingers brushing the lid. It's old Victorian, perhaps. But why lock a trunk in an attic unless it holds something of value? He tugged at the padlock, which held firm. Miss Warwick, her journalist's instinct sharp, knelt beside it. There's a keyhole, but no key. Sir Edmund must have hidden it somewhere. Her eyes darted to Poirot, as if expecting him to produce it from thin air. Poirot's gaze swept the attic, his mind working with the precision of a metronome. The key, mise Amos, is not always a physical object. Sometimes it is knowledge. He moved to a nearby shelf, where a row of books caught his eye. Among them was a worn copy of The Mysterious Affair at Styles, Agatha Christie's first novel. He pulled it down, revealing a small compartment carved into the shelf. Inside lay a brass key, its head shaped like a rose. The guests gasped as Poirot unlocked the trunk, the lid creaking open to reveal a treasure trove of papers, letters, photographs, and a leather-bound journal. Atop it all sat a bundle of yellowed pages, tied with a red ribbon. The title, handwritten in elegant script, The Final Secret. The manuscript, rumored to be Christie's lost work, was real. Poirot's gloved hand lifted the journal, its pages dense with notes in a cramped hand. Not Christie's, but Sir Edmund's. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, his eyes scanning the first page. These are letters between Agatha Christie and a confidant, discussing a manuscript that could shatter reputations. Sir Edmund's notes suggest he planned to reveal it, defying a vow of silence. Mrs. Langston, her voice sharp, interrupted. A vow? You mean this secret society nonsense? It's absurd fairy tales for gullible fools. Poirot turned, his expression unyielding. Madame, the deaths in this manor are no fairy tale. Sir Edmund, the groundskeeper, the librarian all dead because someone wishes this manuscript to remain hidden. The society, I assure you, is real. and one among us may be its agent." The accusation hung in the air, and the guests exchanged wary glances. Julian Marsh, the artist, broke the silence. "Then why not burn it? If it's so dangerous, why keep it at all?" His voice was unsteady, his pencil snapping in his hand. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Because, Monsieur Marsh, to destroy knowledge is to destroy truth, and truth is what Hercule Poirot seeks." He turned to the journal, flipping through its pages. A letter slipped out, its wax seal broken, the paper brittle with age. The handwriting was unmistakably Christie's, and it read, "My dearest friend, I have written something dangerous, a story that unveils truths too potent for the world to bear. The society guards it, but I fear betrayal. If you receive this, protect it or destroy it. The choice is yours. Agatha." The letter sent a chill through the group. Miss Gray, the botanist, spoke softly. "She sounds afraid." What could she have written that was so threatening? Poirot did not answer immediately, his attention caught by a noise of faint scuffle from the far corner of the attic. He gestured for silence, his cane pointing toward a pile of crates. "Someone is here," he said, his voice low. "Reveal yourself, s'il vous plaît." The crates shifted, and Thomas Wren, the librarian's assistant, emerged, his face flushed, his pocket watch dangling from a trembling hand. I was just looking for something," he stammered. "I didn't mean to." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "Monsieur Wren, you are a poor liar. What were you seeking in the shadows?" He stepped closer, his presence commanding, despite his small stature. Wren's eyes darted to the trunk, and Poirot's suspicion deepened. "You know more than you have told us. Speak, or I shall deduce it for you." Wren's shoulders sagged, and he sank to his knees. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," he whispered. "I was sent to watch Sir Edmund, the society. They trusted me to keep the manuscript safe. But he was going to publish it, to betray us all." I panicked. The guests erupted in accusations, but Poirot raised a hand. "Silence. Monsieur Wren, you confess to what? A theft, a betrayal, or perhaps a murder?" His words were a scalpel, cutting through Wren's defenses. "I didn't kill him," Wren cried, tears streaming down his face. "But I told someone. I told them Sir Edmund was going to reveal the manuscript. I didn't know they'd—" His words were cut off by a sudden crash. A stack of crates toppled, and a spark flared in the corner, igniting a pile of old papers. Flames licked upward, hungry and swift, casting the attic in a hellish glow. The guests screamed, scrambling toward the stairs, but Poirot remained calm, his mind racing. "The fire is no accident," he said, seizing a nearby blanket to smother the flames. "Someone seeks to destroy the evidence." Dr. Hargrove and Julian Marsh joined him, beating back the fire with coats and rugs, while Miss Warwick and Miss Gray dragged a heavy trunk to block the spreading flames. Madame Duval, her actress's poise forgotten, shrieked about being trapped, while Mrs. Langston stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the burning papers. Wren, still kneeling, sobbed incoherently. Poirot's quick thinking prevailed, and the fire was extinguished, leaving a charred corner and a haze of smoke. The manuscript, miraculously, was untouched, its pages safe in the trunk. Poirot turned to Wren, his expression stern. "You have much to explain, monsieur. The society, the manuscript, the fire. Who did you tell?" Wren shook his head, his voice barely audible. "I can't say. They'll kill me." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his growing resolve. "Then, Monsieur Wren, you leave me no choice. I shall set a trap for this killer, and the truth will be revealed." He turned to the guests, his voice commanding. "We return to the drawing room. Tonight, we shall dine together, and I, Hercule Poirot, will ensure that the one who set this fire, who seeks to bury Madame Christie's secret, will make a mistake." As the group descended the attic stairs, the manor seemed to close in around them, its walls whispering of secrets yet to be uncovered. Poirot carried the manuscript and journal, his mind already plotting the trap. The attic had revealed much, but the killer remained at large, and the danger was far from over. The stage was set for a confrontation, and Poirot knew that the next move would be decisive. Chapter 12. Flames of Truth. Air in Ashburn Manor was thick with the acrid scent of smoke, curling like a sinister wraith through the grand hall. The fire had erupted with alarming speed, its flames licking at the ancient oak paneling of the attic stairwell, threatening to consume the precious trunk containing Agatha Christie's letters and the manuscript titled The Final Secret. Hercule Poirot stood at the base of the stairs, his small frame silhouetted against a flickering orange glow, his mustache twitching as he assessed the chaos with a calm that bordered on supernatural. "Quickly, Mies Amos," he called, his voice cutting through the panicked shouts of the guests. "We must act with precision. Monsieur Grayson, fetch the buckets from the kitchen. Monsieur Marsh, assist him. Madame Claire, organize the others to form a chain. We will not lose the truth to these flames." The guests, shaken from their earlier paralysis, sprang into action. Madame Claire Dubois, her silver hair disheveled but her stage presence intact, marshaled the group with the authority of a seasoned director. "You heard, Monsieur Poirot," she barked. "Move, or we'll all be ash." Mr. Julian Marsh, the young playwright, sprinted toward the kitchen alongside the butler. Mr. Grayson, their footsteps echoing on the polished floors. Miss Evelyn Carver, the journalist, hesitated only a moment before joining the effort, her notebook abandoned on a side table. Dr. Lydia Hawthorne, the botanist, and Mr. Percy Whitmore, the art dealer, formed the start of the water chain, their hands trembling but determined. Even the Durr solicitor, Mr. Reginald Thorne, and the retired Colonel, Sir Charles Rutherford, rolled up their sleeves. Their earlier suspicions of one another momentarily set aside, only Mrs. Beatrice Langley, the cryptic widow, lingered at the edge of the group, her veiled face unreadable, her hands clasped tightly as if guarding a secret of her own. Poirot, ever the conductor of this chaotic orchestra, directed the effort with meticulous care. Buckets of water passed from hand to hand, dousing the flames that had begun to creep toward the attic's doorway. The manuscript, still nestled in its trunk, was the prize they fought for, its pages holding the key to the murders that had stained Ashburn Manor's legacy. Poirot's sharp eyes darted between the guests, noting their movements, their expressions, their hesitations. The fire, he suspected, was no accident. It was a desperate act, a diversion meant to destroy evidence or to steal it, as the last of the flames sputtered out, leaving the stairwell charred but intact. Poirot climbed to the attic, his steps deliberate. The trunk remained untouched, its lock secure, but the air was heavy with the scent of petrol. "Most curious," he murmured, his gloved fingers brushing the scorched floorboards. This was no spark from a faulty wire. Someone wished to erase the past. Madame Claire, breathless from the effort, joined him. "You think the killer started this?" she asked, her voice low, as if the walls themselves might overhear. Poirot's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "I think, madame, that the killer grows desperate. The manuscript is a threat, and they will stop at nothing to protect their secret." Miss Carver appeared at the attic door, her face smudged with soot. "The letters are safe, thank heavens. But why go to such lengths? What's in that manuscript that's worth all this?" Poirot did not answer immediately. Instead, he knelt beside the trunk, his fingers tracing the intricate carvings on its lid. The letters inside, penned by Agatha Christie to an unknown confidant, spoke of a manuscript that could ruin reputations, a work that hinted at a scandal buried deep in the literary world. The journal found in Sir Edmund Ashburn's secret room had confirmed its existence, and the coded messages scattered throughout the manor pointed to a truth that someone was willing to kill to keep hidden. "Bring the trunk to the drawing room," Poirot instructed. "We will examine it together, under the eyes of all. No more secrets will be stolen this night." The guests gathered in the drawing room, the atmosphere heavy with suspicion. The storm outside had not abated, its thunder rattling the windows, as if in protest of the truths about to be unveiled. The trunk was placed on a long table, its presence commanding the room's attention. Poirot stood beside it, his small stature belying the authority in his voice. "Mies Amos," he began. "The fire was a calculated act, a diversion to allow someone among us to steal these letters. But Hercule Poirot is not so easily deceived. The truth It is like a flame itself. It cannot be extinguished, only delayed. Sir Charles snorted, his mustache bristling. A fine speech, Poirot, but who's to say one of us isn't still planning to make off with the lot? We're all suspects, aren't we? Indeed, Poirot said, his eyes sweeping the room. And that is why we will open the trunk now, together, and see what secrets it holds. Mr. Grayson produced a key, his hands trembling as he unlocked the trunk. The lid creaked open, revealing a stack of yellowed envelopes, each bearing Agatha Christie's elegant handwriting. Poirot lifted the topmost letter, its wax seal broken, and read aloud, "My dearest friend, if this manuscript is ever found, it will shake the foundations of those who think they know me. But I cannot publish it, not while the truth could destroy so much." A murmur rippled through the group. Dr. Hawthorne leaned forward, her scientific curiosity piqued. What does she mean, destroy so much? Was she protecting someone? Or something? Miss Carver added, her journalist's instincts flaring. This sounds like more than a novel. It's personal. Poirot's mustache twitched. You are both correct. The manuscript, the final secret, is not merely a story. It is a confession, a revelation of a truth Madame Christie chose to conceal, and someone in this room knows why. Mrs. Langley's veil shifted slightly, revealing a flicker of unease in her blue eyes. You speak as if you know more than you're saying, Monsieur Poirot. Why not tell us who you suspect? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Patience, Madame, the truth reveals itself in its own time. But let us consider the fire. It was set to destroy these letters, but also to distract us. While we fought the flames, someone slipped away. He turned to Mr. Whitmore, the art dealer, whose jovial demeanor had faded. Monsieur Whitmore, you were the last to join the water chain. Where were you when the fire began? Whitmore's face reddened. I was in the library, looking for a book to calm my nerves. This whole affair has me rattled, Poirot. A book. Poirot's tone was mild, but his eyes were sharp. Or perhaps something else. Monsieur Grayson, did you not mention a hidden camera in the manor, installed by Sir Edmund to protect his collection? The butler nodded, his face pale. Yes, sir. It's in the corridor near the attic. Sir Edmund was paranoid about theft. Then, let us see what it captured, Poirot said, his voice firm. The group followed him to a small room off the main hall, where a grainy monitor displayed footage from the hidden camera. Poirot rewound the tape, the images flickering until they settled on a figure moving swiftly through the corridor, just as the fire began. The figure was cloaked, but a glint of jewelry, a distinctive emerald ring caught the light. Miss Carver gasped. That's my ring, she exclaimed, holding up her hand to display the identical emerald. But I swear, I was with the others when the fire started. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Then how, mademoiselle, does your ring appear in the footage? Before she could answer, Mr. Marshall broke out. It was planted. Miss Carver insisted. Someone must have taken it from my room to frame me. Possible, Poirot said, but we will verify. Madame Claire, you mentioned a play based on an unpublished Christie story. Did it feature such a ring? The actress frowned, her memory straining. There was a prop. Yes, an emerald ring, used as a clue in the hidden door. Sir Edmund was fascinated by it. He even had a replica made. Poirot's mind raced. The ring, the fire, the manuscript, all were pieces of a puzzle that pointed to a deeper conspiracy. Monsieur Grayson, he said, search Miss Carver's room for her ring. If it is there, we have a new question. Who stole it, and why? The butler returned minutes later, holding the emerald ring. Miss Carver's face paled. I don't understand. I haven't worn it since yesterday. Then someone took it, Poirot said, and used it to cast suspicion on you. But their true target was the manuscript. He turned to the group, his gaze piercing. The fire was a diversion, but it failed. The letters remain, and they point to a truth someone is desperate to hide. Let us examine them further. The guests returned to the drawing room, where Poirot carefully sifted through the letters. One caught his eye, its text more urgent than the others. The society will stop at nothing to protect the secret. They believe it could ruin her legacy. I fear I have gone too far. The society, Poirot murmured. Sir Edmund mentioned a secret society in his journal, a group dedicated to guarding Agatha Christie's unpublished works. But who among you is their agent? Mr. Finch, the nervous librarian, shifted uncomfortably. This is absurd, he stammered. I'm just a scholar. I came here to study Sir Edmund's collection, not to burn it. Yet you knew of the manuscript's existence, Poirot countered, and you were quick to point out the missing book in the library. Too quick, perhaps. Mr. Finch's spectacles slipped down his nose. I was only trying to help. Poirot turned to the trunk, pulling out another letter. This one was different. Its ink faded, but its words clear. The name you seek is in the margins. Look to the one who hides in plain sight. He opened the final secret, its pages brittle with age. In the margins, scrawled in Agatha Christie's hand, was a single name, Langley. All eyes turned to Mrs. Beatrice Langley, whose veil could not hide the sudden tension in her posture. What is this nonsense? She demanded, her voice sharp. Poirot stepped closer, his voice low and steady. Madame Langley, you have been most elusive. Your veil, your silence, your presence at the edge of every crisis. The letters suggest you are more than a guest. Are you the society's guardian, sent to ensure the manuscript never sees the light of day? Mrs. Langley's hands trembled, but her voice was firm. You accuse me without proof, Monsieur Poirot. I am a widow, nothing more. Yet the name in the manuscript is yours, Poirot said. And the ring, stolen from Mademoiselle Carver, was used to divert suspicion. A clever ploy, but not clever enough. He turned to the group, his presence commanding. The fire was meant to destroy the letters, but it also gave the thief a chance to steal them. Madame Langley, you were absent when the fire began. Did you hope to take the letters and vanish into the storm? Mrs. Langley stood, her veil falling slightly to reveal a face lined with both age and resolve. You are a clever man, Monsieur Poirot, she said. But you cannot prove I started the fire or took the ring. Not yet, Poirot said, his smile faint but unyielding. But the night is not over, and the truth is near. I will unmask you, madame, at dawn. The guests exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of Poirot's words settling over them like a shroud. The storm outside roared, but within Ashbourne Manor, a different storm was brewing, one of secrets, lies, and a truth that could no longer be contained. Poirot returned to the trunk, his fingers lingering on the manuscript. The name Langley burned in his mind, a beacon pointing to the heart of the mystery. As the clock ticked toward morning, he knew the final confrontation was imminent, and he would be ready.